Chapter 766. Military counselor did not answer Li Tianlan's question, nor could he. In fact, Li Tianlan had been in the desert for a year, but Qin Weibai had left Jianghu state. It was said that she had gone to Switzerland. This news had aroused all kinds of speculation in some small circles in Jianghu state. Both sides were not nameless pawns. Dongqing Wudi could come to the desert prison by Qingcheng could come, and so could military counselor. With Qin Weibai's power, if she wanted to go to the desert prison, there would be no difficulty. Xiao Mahai, who completely regarded Li Tianlan as his ancestor, naturally did not dare to disobey the mistress. Under such circumstances, Qin Weibai was far away from Jianghu state, which made people speculate about other possibilities. It was inconsistent with his deep feelings. Many people felt that this matter was a little interesting. Li Tianlan glanced at him and did not continue to ask. He said casually, "Have you eaten? Eat something together? Yesterday, a new batch of seafood arrived here. The chef's skills are passable. I know you can't stand being wrong here eating delicacies every day." Dongqing Wudi said with a smile and shook his head slightly. The annual maintenance fee allocated by Jianghu state to the desert prison was just over 20 million yuan, which was a veritable public fund. Xiao Mahai took nearly a quarter of this money and used it as Li Tianlan's food expenses. Since Li Tianlan entered the desert prison, Xiao Mahai had hired more than 10 chefs who were proficient in different cuisines. Countless expensive ingredients, tobacco and alcohol were basically transported by air. A fighter jet near the prison was now responsible for this work. Xiao Mahai informed the nearest military region of the ingredients he needed, and then sent a fighter jet to the military region to fetch them. He was blatant and undisguised. The army headquarters and even the parliament had discussed the issue of Xiao Mahai's misuse of funds. More than one counselor even proposed to take Xiao Mahai down and let him go to Jianghu state for a talk. Xiao Mahai didn't care at all. He was clinging to Li Tianlan. The result of this was obvious. Xiao Mahai really didn't move. No matter how many attacks he suffered, no one could shake his position. "Let's go for a drink." Li Tianlan smiled. Dongqing Wudi hesitated, sighed slightly, shook his head and said, "Forget it. I have to go to the Beijiang military region. There is a meeting in the army headquarters in the evening. Time is tight. Maybe next time." Li Tianlan was slightly startled. He nodded and said, "All right. Then I'll go back too." The military counselor stood up. The three of them walked out of the prison gate. "Do you have any clues about the North Sea attackers?" Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Li Tianlan was naturally curious about the mysterious chosen one who really stood at the end of martial arts. "No." Dongqing Wudi shook his head. "It's like he disappeared completely. All the signs show that this person doesn't exist." He suddenly smiled and said, "This has almost become an unsolved mystery. It's also because of him that the dark world has been quiet during this period of time. Not to mention waves, not even a wave. Everyone is afraid to be the first bird to stand out and be killed by him. But since that day there has been no news from him." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He did have some doubts about that mysterious genius, but at the same time he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Every time he watched that video he felt a sense of familiarity. Li Tianlan shook his head. In silence, the gate of the desert prison slowly opened, and the three of them were already surrounded by yellow sand. "Minister, take care." Li Tianlan stretched out his hand, his expression calm and serious. Dongqing Wudi took a deep look at him, shook hands with him and turned to board the plane. The rotors of the helicopter whistled, driving the sand all over the sky and flew higher and higher. Li Tianlan raised his head and watched quietly. The flying sand was bounced away by his sword energy and fell on the original terrain. It became a khaki tornado. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, quiet like a glimmer of light under the scorching sun in the desert. Xiao Mahai came over and asked cautiously, "Your Highness, what do you want for lunch?" "Serve the third dish." Li Tianlan turned around and walked into the prison. Xiao Mahai nodded. Li Tianlan had a special menu in the prison, which was divided into 6 types, from 1 to 6. There were 6 fixed dishes on each menu, and the other 2 could be matched at will. Menu number 3 was the dish of tianfu with plenty of chili. Li Tianlan usually ate most of the dishes in menu number 3. The two walked back to the prison. Along the fine cracks all over the prison, he looked at the gate of the maze that really belonged to the scope. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and walked over. The prison guard had already opened the door with a respectful face. "You don't have to follow me." Li Tianlan said, "Go prepare the food and open a bottle of wine." Xiao Mahai nodded and wrote it down. He said softly, Maotai or Wuyangya? Or red wine? Give me some of both, Li Tianlan said. Xiao Mahai nodded and turned to the kitchen. The narrow corridor of the prison was lit with faint lights that could confuse people's perception. Li Tianlan walked silently in the maze until he reached the enemy near the core area. What appeared in front of him was a narrow door. It was quiet inside the door. Li Tianlan waved his hand to call a prison guard and said lightly, "Open the door." This was not in line with the rules, but the prison guard did not talk nonsense. After entering the complicated password, he opened the prison door. With a slight sound, a simple room appeared in front of Li Tianlan. It was an ordinary single bed with a thick mattress that looked very comfortable. An old cup was casually thrown on the bed. There was a desk and a chair in the space of about 10 square meters. There was a lamp on the desk. The toilet was in the corner and there were some books on a small cabinet facing the toilet. A white-haired old man, who looked to be in his 60s or 70s and wearing presbyopic glasses, was sitting at the desk and reading with the help of the faint light from the small window. Hearing the sound, he turned his head and looked at Li Tianlan with some doubts. New cellmate? The old man stood up and frowned. There should be single rooms here. He suddenly narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, "So, I'm going to be executed. Make room for the newcomer?" Prisoners are rarely executed in the desert prison. It can be said that there is no death penalty here. Li Tianlan said lightly. It's not that there is no death penalty but that there is no need. The old man looked at Li Tianlan for a while and laughed. Everyone who stays here is living a life worse than death. You look like you're quite relaxed, Li Tianlan said as he looked at the surroundings. What else can I do? The old man said quietly. He looked at the prison door that was still open, and then looked at Li Tianlan, seeming to find that Li Tianlan was dressed completely differently from the prisoners. You are? The old man was a little confused. Prison guard? Not quite. Prison management? It was even more unlikely. He was too young. Was he here to accompany the big shots of the army headquarters to inspect the work? But why did he come to contact him alone? From the standpoint of the prison, I can be regarded as your cellmate, Li Tianlan said, but I live outside. Outside? The old man's eyes flickered and he tentatively said, what if I stand in another standpoint? Li Tianlan turned around and said calmly, from another standpoint, I am your god. The old man suddenly raised his eyebrows. His eyes instantly became incomparably sharp. God? He asked. It was not a rhetorical question but a question. Who do you think you are, Your Highness? Xiao Mahai's voice appeared at the door, interrupting the old man's sneer. I just received a notice from the parliament. Deputy Prime Minister Hua Jingyang, a member of the parliament, will come to the desert prison in a few days. He hopes to talk to you face to face. Li Tianlan said, arrange a time. Okay. Xiao Mahai nodded, looked at the old man in surprise and turned to leave. The old man's figure stiffened for a moment. He looked at the direction of Xiao Mahai's departure and thought about the conversation between them just now. Jianghu State member? Deputy Prime Minister Hua Jingyang? Even if he didn't know who the current members of Jianghu State were, at least he knew Xiao Mahai, the warden. He raised his head stiffly and looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was also looking at him, expressionless. Okay, God. The old man smiled bitterly. What do you want me to do? I want to learn. Li Tianlan walked out of the prison and waved his hand. Let's have dinner together. The old man followed Li Tianlan quietly. What do you want to learn? How to be a successful leader, Li Tianlan asked. The old man froze and looked up at Li Tianlan. Success. Success? He said it silently for a while and then laughed at himself. Do you know what you're asking? Are you asking a loser for advice on the experience of success? Just because you've failed when you're closest to success. Li Tianlan said meaningfully, so I'm sure you can teach me a lot. The old man followed Li Tianlan with a blank face, and his eyes were in a trance. Li Tianlan stopped talking. He just quietly observed the old man, keeping his composure. Zhou Tong. This was a name that many people in Jianghu State had forgotten. This name might appear in history books as a negative teaching material for many years to come. But over the years, this name had completely disappeared in Jianghu State. But if time went back more than a decade ago, this was one of the most powerful names in Jianghu State. He was a former member of parliament of Jianghu State and the speaker of Tianfu province. If one were to be exact. In those days he was the main competitor of Li Huaqing, the current president of Jianghu State. What they fought for was not the position of president, but the position of crown prince. At that time the academics was not as big as it was now, and Li Huaqing had almost no chance of winning. Everyone thought that Zhou Tong would reach the top. But just a month before the dust settled, when Zhou Tong's voice completely overwhelmed Li Huaqing's, when Zhou Tong was the closest to success, he came to the desert prison. That was the largest conflict between the academics and the Prince Group. At that time, Zhou Tong was one of the most important leaders of the Prince Group. If he hadn't competed so fiercely with Li Huaqing and had taken a step back, the Prime Minister of Jianghu State would basically have nothing to do with Chen Fangqing today. Even today, some of Zhou Tong's old subordinates and confidants promoted by him were still active in the Prince Group. And his son was now the Deputy Speaker of the Southwest Affairs, enjoying the treatment of the governor. Although he was not as dazzling as Zhou Yuanshan because of Zhou Tong, he was almost recognized as the successor of the big group within the Prince Group. Military Counselor had already taken action in the outside world. So during this year in the desert prison, Li Tianlan naturally would not be idle. Chapter 767. Switzerland, Forgotten City. In the luxurious and exquisite office, a person in charge of the Lin clan's branch who could summon wind and rain in the outside world, carefully retreated from the office with a respectful smile. Horsewoman stood at the door, looking at him silently and expressionlessly. The man, who looked over 50 years old, shook hands with Horsewoman with a warm smile, exchanged feelings and then left contentedly. It was 9 o'clock in the evening in Switzerland. It was quiet in Forgotten City. Horsewoman looked at her watch, took out her mobile phone and checked the schedule. After confirming that the boss would not receive other guests today and that there was nothing else to deal with, she turned and walked into the office. Qin Weibai, dressed in a moon-white cheongsam, was sitting behind the desk, dealing with documents. She still had an exquisite and perfect face, but at this moment her whole aura seemed to be changing silently. It was not a kind of maturity after experiencing wind and rain, but a kind of change from calmness to sharpness. She quietly flipped through the documents in her hand, with a calm and serious face. Her every move was with indescribable rationality and magnanimity. This picture was beautiful. But this aura was so strong that Horsewoman subconsciously ignored her appearance and gender. Every time this happened, Horsewoman would think of the master of Samsara Palace. Facing the current Qin Weibai was more and more similar to facing the former master of Samsara Palace. For half a year, Qin Weibai sat in the position of the patriarch of the Lin clan. Horsewoman witnessed with her own eyes that she was becoming more and more powerful. She did not have world-shaking force, but she had established enough prestige in the branch system of the Lin clan in the shortest time. This half a year was busy and fulfilling. Qin Weibai completely squeezed into the core of the Lin clan bit by bit and became a veritable patriarch of the Lin clan. A month ago, Lin Fengting, who had stayed in Forgotten City for nearly half a year, took his luggage and went on a trip, which was enough to show that he was completely relieved about the situation of the Lin clan. South America has been very lively recently. Hearing the footsteps, Qin Weibai looked up at Horsewoman and said softly. Horsewoman was stunned and thought of the head of the branch who had just left. Lin Bujing. According to the genealogical records of the Lin clan, this branch had left the headquarters for nearly 200 years and had been developing in South America. Lin Bujing was already the 6th generation in charge of this branch. The Lin clan of South America was not considered the top wealthy family in the entire South American circle, but it had been firmly in the front line for many years. It was relatively influential in the top circle and involved in more complicated fields. Some information flashed through Horsewoman's mind. She looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "South America?" Qin Weibai nodded and took a sip of water from the cup. Horsewoman was a little confused. Lin Bujing didn't need to ask the headquarters for help in South America, did he? Even if Lin Bujing was not the top figure in South America, he was at least close to the top of the pyramid. If it was something in South America, what on earth had he encountered that made him rush back to the headquarters to find Qin Weibai? There are some remaining questions about the Heroes Club. Qin Weibai stood up and stretched gently. Her graceful body suddenly showed a thrilling curve. She wore a cotton dress and moved her body in the office. She frowned and said, "Since the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe, there has been no new invincible realm expert in the Heroes Club. They have no leader and their internal affairs have never been peaceful. This is a behemoth that dominates South America and North America. Its internal turmoil has also affected many fields in South America. The Lin family of South America has also been greatly affected." Horsewoman's eyes flickered and she did not speak for a while. This was the case. The problem was often encountered in the Lin clan. Or it could be said that it had often appeared in the past 6 months. As the patriarch of the Lin clan, There were not many things that needed to be busy under normal circumstances. But the key was that the Samsara Palace had forcibly turned the normal state of the dark world into an abnormal state. In the chaos in Eastern Europe, more than half of the invincible realm experts on the divine and holy lists had fallen. Almost all the superpowers, including the Heroes Club, the Jianghu family of South America, the Men in Black, the Fantasy World, the Shadow Throne, most of the superpowers were leaderless. The whole dark world seemed calm, but the internal fighting had become more and more intense. Not only the Lin clan of South America, but almost all the branches of the Lin clan scattered all over the world were affected. Qin Weibai also took advantage of this matter to mediate and quickly established her prestige. In Horsewoman's impression, the Lin clan of South America seemed to have a problem a few months ago and was quickly solved. The Heroes Club. Is someone trying to integrate the forces of the Heroes Club? Is it the South American government or private? Horsewoman asked softly. It's the Jianghu family of South America, Qin Weibai said. Horsewoman suddenly narrowed her eyes. Annexation? How can it be so easy? Qin Weibai shook her head. This is the most complicated part. What do you need me to do? Horsewoman asked directly. The Heroes Club belonged to South America and had a deep cooperative relationship with many South American governments. When they were leaderless, the South American government wanted to take the Heroes Club for its own use. Although this matter was sensitive, it was not unnegotiable. The worst result was to break up and negotiate, but they would not fight. But the Jianghu family of South America was also a giant in South America. Once they annexed the Heroes Club, the two forces would unite. The Jianghu family of South America would have the power to seriously threaten any country in South America, and no country would be willing to tolerate it. Once this kind of thing started, it was almost equal to a war. With the right opportunity, other forces would naturally not stand idly by. The whole South America would be in a mess. No wonder Lin Bujing hurried back to the headquarters again. Go to South America. Qin Weibai said softly, meet Jiang Guochu in my name and talk to him. See his attitude first. If I'm not wrong, Jiang Guochu should have entered the invincible realm now. Horsewoman nodded, not surprised at all. In fact, before Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu appeared, Jiang Guochu had always been the youngest invincible realm expert in the dark world. He had been stuck at this threshold for several years. Now that he was in his early 30s, it was almost natural for him to enter the invincible realm. I'll go now, Horsewoman said softly. She paused, her eyes flashed, and she said softly, if there is a chance, should we, let's see his attitude first and then report to me. I hope he will remember one thing. Today the #1 expert in the dark world is still in the Lin clan. Horsewoman nodded, turned around, and left directly. Qin Weibai sat back at her desk and turned on the computer. There was a video file on the desktop that she had watched countless times. She moved the mouse and clicked on the video. In the picture, the Rolls-Royce was slowly approaching Mount Dibbing. The flawless young man got out of the car and looked at the calm Mount Dibbing with a cold expression. Qin Weibai stared blankly at the young man in the video and subconsciously touched her face. Her eyes were a little dazed and she whispered, so is this a coincidence or an accident? The phone suddenly rang. Qin Weibai was slightly shocked. She took out the mobile phone beside her and looked at the number. After hesitating for a while, she pressed the answer button. What's the matter? She asked directly in a light voice. I went to the desert prison with Dongqing Wudi today and now I just returned to Yuzhou. Military counselor's calm voice sounded on the phone. Qin Weibai's bright eyes flickered slightly and she whispered, how is he? Very good but also very bad. Military counselor said. Be more specific. Qin Weibai frowned. Military counselor hesitated. He subconsciously wanted to tell Qin Weibai about Li Tianlan's choice in martial arts. But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he realized that Li Tianlan was not the person he had imagined. He could not understand anything about martial arts at all. He thought about how to phrase his words. After a moment of silence, he said helplessly, you should go and see for yourself. Qin Weibai held the mobile phone in silence, and the expression on her dreamy perfect face was a little complicated. He asked me today why you were hiding from him. Military counselor smiled bitterly. I have nothing to say. Qin Weibai still did not speak and she looked a little stubborn. Military counselor waited quietly for a long time before he said lightly, why? You obviously want to see him. What's the point of hiding in Switzerland? Who told you that I want to see him? Qin Weibai's tone was cold. You said it. You said that you are the same and it's really the same. Since you are the same, then if you are the palace master you must want to see him now. Military counselor said calmly. Qin Weibai paused and continued to be silent. What are you insisting on? Military counselor chuckled. Or what are you hesitating about? I don't know. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she said softly. Her voice was a little hoarse. You don't know if you love him? Military counselor's tone was light without any taste. I said that we are the same. I can't describe that kind of the same as you. To be exact, this kind of essence is exactly the same. I can even let her affect my thoughts. This is not hypnosis but a natural reaction when facing myself. I don't know if I love him or not, or I love him, but I don't know if this is the result of her influence. Qin Weibai said calmly. Excuses. Military counselor's tone was understated. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. He can affect you and you can naturally affect him. You've been together for so long. When has the palace master ever changed her mind? The palace master hasn't changed and you naturally won't change. So you are lying. Military counselor said slowly, What on earth don't you know? Qin Weibai took a deep breath and said softly, He said he wanted to see me? Military counselor was stunned and shook his head. No, he just asked you why you were hiding from him. He asked me why I was hiding from him, Qin Weibai laughed and her voice was a little sad. Are you sure that the me he said is really me? Military counselor suddenly fell silent. Qin Weibai silently hung up the phone and reached out to gently cover her chest. Her heartbeat was rising and falling slowly, unusually stable. And an incomparably strong heartbeat was beating in sync with her heartbeat. But in addition there was a third heartbeat beating slowly, extremely weak but extremely real. Qin Weibai clenched her fists. Her face was pale, and her eyes suddenly became a little scared. Chapter 768. The night wind blew across Beihai. The lights on Mount Dibing gradually dimmed. In the quiet world, Wang Xingxiao sat on the stage of formidable person, looking at the calm Beihai and subconsciously tightened his coat. It was October. When the weather in the south was just about to cool down, Beihai had gradually become cold. There was a pot of wine beside him, and the wine had already been emptied. His face was rosy, and his somewhat hazy and drunk eyes silently looked at the moonlight reflected on the surface of the sea. He was in a daze and no one knew what he was thinking. He had been the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai for more than half a year. After that world-shocking battle, Wang Xingxiao once again kept a low profile. He became more and more silent. He restrained all his sharpness, and the loftiness in the past seemed to have disappeared. He became more and more calm. Only the never-ending conscription in Beihai province could let people feel the power of the new patriarch of Beihai. The game with Jianghu state was still going on. But the compromise was done step by step. Following the North Sea Legion's compromise, a series of large-scale drills were held within the North Sea Legion. The hundreds of thousands of newly enlisted soldiers were undergoing special training every day before being thrown onto the drill field. After victory or defeat, they would undergo even more rigorous training. Beihai province seemed to be completely silent. But behind this silence, the atmosphere of the whole Beihai province became more and more iron-blooded. No one questioned Wang Xingxiao. That time the whole Beihai saw Wang Xingxiao's attitude. Countless civilians of the North Sea province expressed sufficient support for the new patriarch. With the support of the people, the situation in Beihai gradually stabilized after many compromises. Although all of this was only temporary stability for the North Sea province, it was an extremely rare opportunity to catch their breath. Wang Xingxiao's chin grew a short beard and he looked more and more mature. The smile that once made people feel comfortable was less and less. His temperament gradually changed, becoming a little gloomy and more powerful. The orders from Mount Dibing had become less and less. Most of the time, Wang Xingxiao sat on the stage of formidable person. He ate, practiced, and meditated. The stage of formidable person seemed to have become his private residence. For half a year, he confined himself in the small space of the stage of formidable person. He spent every day with the stone of formidable person and almost never left the stage of formidable person. This meant that he had never left Mount Dibing. As a result, he missed out on many important things. The phone vibrated slightly and the screen lit up. After drinking the last sip of wine, Wang Xingxiao felt refreshed. He took the phone and connected the video call. In the video there was a room filled with warm light. In the warm yellow light, Song Ci, who was wearing plain pajamas, had long hair. Her slightly plump face was filled with gentleness. Have you eaten? Looking at the dark stage of formidable person on the screen, Song Ci asked softly. Not yet. Jing Xin is in Mount Dibing. I've made an appointment with him to eat together. Wang Xingxiao laughed. The slight wrinkles between his eyebrows subconsciously relaxed, and his whole body relaxed. It's so late. Why haven't you gone to bed? Your son woke up. It took me a long time to coax him to sleep, but I'm not sleepy anymore. Song Si held the phone and moved the camera. A newborn baby appeared on the screen. He had a small body and a small face. His mouth was covered and he was sleeping soundly. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were calm, but there was a touch of doting and guilt deep in his eyes. This was his and Song Si's child. A few months ago when the child was born he didn't leave Mount Dibing, so he didn't see the birth with his own eyes. Since the child was born, he hadn't even seen his father in the video. Wang Xingxiao's mouth moved and he didn't know what to say for a while. The camera turned. Song Si glanced at Wang Xingxiao and said with a faint smile, "What? Are you afraid that Haoyin will blame you for being a bad father?" Their child was named Wang Haoyin, and his nickname was Tutu. It was the name that Wang Xingxiao and Song Si decided before the child was born. Wang Xingxiao sighed softly, feeling a little lost. "Don't worry. When he's older, I'll tell him that he has the best father who loves him the most." Song Si said softly. "It won't take that long." Wang Xingxiao smiled and said softly, "When the situation stabilizes, I'll take you home." "Okay." Song Si nodded. She stared at Wang Xingxiao's face quietly and became silent. "What's wrong?" Wang Xingxiao touched his face. "Nothing." Song Si shook her head and said softly, "I just miss you." Wang Xingxiao stopped talking and looked at the screen quietly. There were thousands of words to say, but it seemed that everything was in silence. In the slight sound of footsteps, Wang Jingxin came over with a food box. Seeing this scene, he paused and said with a smile, "I'll come back later." "No need." Wang Xingxiao smiled and hung up the video. He glanced at Wang Jingxin and asked, "How's your wife and child?" "Very good. She asked me to thank you. She's very comfortable living here during this time." Wang Jingxin smiled. Her child was already in primary school. His wife was originally a middle-level cadre of the Lin and Trade Union, which was purely an idle job. Half a year ago, the situation in Jianghu suddenly changed. After Wang Jingxin was transferred to Jianghu as the governor, he placed his wife and child in Mount Dibing. In terms of the political climate in Jianghu, Mount Dibing was undoubtedly the best. "We're a family. Don't be so polite." Wang Xingxiao shook his head, thought for a while and said softly, "How's the situation in Jianghu?" "Very good." Wang Jingxin opened the food box, took out some side dishes and took out a pot of wine. "Don't worry, there won't be any problems." Wang Xingxiao nodded, picked up the wine glass and took a sip. He had no doubt about Wang Jingxin's ability. In fact, Wang Jingxin's situation when he first arrived in Jianghu was not good. In half a year he had completely established his foothold, and his performance had also been unanimously recognized by some big shots of the Southeast Group. In the case that Wang Qinglei was already out of control, facing his wild ambition, the Southeast Group could only put more hope on Wang Jingxin, and his performance made everyone very satisfied. "How's Haoyin? The little guys are very cute. When are you going to let them come back?" Wang Jingxin asked with a smile. "Now is not the time. We'll see the specific situation in a year." Wang Xingxiao frowned. "Chairman Wen?" Wang Jingxin hesitated for a brief moment. He wanted to speak but stopped himself. In fact, the reason why he came back this time was mainly to ask about Wen Siyuan's advancement and retreat a year later. This was undoubtedly the most crucial adjustment. Wen Siyuan could take a step forward, stay at the same spot, or retreat. Furthermore, there were 3 outcomes and any one of them could turn into a good or bad news. Wang Jingxin wanted a clear outcome, and this also concerned whether his methods in Jianghu were firm or gentle. "It's hard to say." Wang Xingxiao shook his head. Whether Li Huaqing stayed or not and Wen Siyuan's advancement and retreat could be said to be the most concerned issues in the next session. Many things had already begun to operate, and Wang Xingxiao could grasp the process and steps in detail. But for now the result was still not clear enough and could even be said to be confusing. "Let's see if we can stop Wang Qinglei." Wang Xingxiao said softly, "If we can stop him, everything will be fine. If we can't, the specific results may only be known at the end." "Jianghu is not a big problem," Wang Jingxin said calmly. Jianghu was a province deeply affected by Wuxia. Wang Jingxin could control the situation in Jianghu and could play a great role, but he could not play a decisive role. "Just do your best," Wang Qinglei said softly. He calculated the time and suddenly smiled. "Don't worry, it's okay. At least there shouldn't be the worst result." Wang Jingxin silently took a sip of wine and did not speak. The so-called worst result was naturally the change of the chairman of Beihai province. If that day really came, it meant that the entire southeast group and the Wang family of Beihai would face a critical moment of life and death. Wang Xingxiao said that such a result would not happen. Where did his confidence come from? Wang Xingxiao did not explain anything. He just held the wine glass and quietly looked at the calm Beihai in front of him. His eyes fell on a certain point on the sea level and he was silent for a long time. Chapter 769. Wang Jingxin was not relieved. In the dim light of the sea, he looked at the calm Wang Xingxiao and felt more and more uneasy. "Do we still have trump cards?" he asked softly. After a pause, he continued, "I'm not talking about those troops." "Yes." Wang Xingxiao laughed softly. "Where are they?" Wang Jingxin stared at his profile and said in a low voice. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a while and said slowly, "Tianan." Wang Jingxin took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "Tianan?" The current situation in Tianan was very calm. At least on the surface it was calm. The Freedom Corps guarded Ningbian, strictly trained, and served as the new gateway to the southern border of Jianghu state. After the chaos in Eastern Europe, the large amount of benefits Li Tianlan had gained in the 5 Eastern European countries had now turned into money. More than 30 wealthy families in Eastern Europe now had close cooperation with Li Tianlan, based in the 5 Eastern European countries. Even some of the wealthy families in Snow Country had boarded Li Tianlan's ship. Various fields in the 5 Eastern European countries had been monopolized by these wealthy families, and part of the business of Jianghu state had also started cooperation with these wealthy families. There was no doubt that whether they wanted to get involved in the 5 Eastern European countries or cooperate with Jianghu state, they needed Li Tianlan's approval. Because of this, Li Tianlan had obtained a large number of industrial shares of dozens of wealthy families. After a year, these shares had turned into almost astronomical dividends, and a large number of dividends were invested in the construction of Shenyuan City. In addition, a large number of funds and venture capital inside Jianghu state had poured into Shenyuan City. This small city, which used to be called Tunan, was shabby and desolate. It was even worse than some of the more developed towns in Jianghu state. With this city as the foundation, Shenyuan City was building a brand new city from beginning to end. The huge amount of work, the long urban planning, and the various industrial resources in the city were enough to make people jealous. The first investment of Huading Flourishing Age Fund had reached more than 30 billion, and this was only the first phase of investment. All the big families of the giant group were also contributing their strength. The graduates of the 2 academies recruited by Emperor Dong's palace also began to play their roles. Their combat effectiveness was improving. Among these people, some of the families they belonged to also began to migrate to Tianan. Some refugees from several small countries near Tianan and even some veterans from the Golden Triangle also began to settle down in Shenyuan City. Sufficient funds and a gradually increasing population would eventually become a huge productivity. Ning Qianqing also began to become more and more mature. In just 1 year, the size of Shenyuan City had doubled. All of this meant that Shenyuan City had completely entered the normal stage. Moreover, everyone knew very well that this wasn't the fastest speed in Shenyuan City. While many people were paying attention to the desert, when Li Tianlan officially got out of prison and returned to Tianan, all kinds of investments would probably usher in a new round of explosive growth. Once such a result appeared, at least the Flourishing Age Fund, which had never been short of money and could even treat money as waste paper, would definitely invest an amount beyond everyone's imagination in Shenyuan City. The rapid development of Shenyuan City was also the reason why the Tianan city was calm on the surface. Calm on the surface, but it also meant that undercurrents were surging in the dark. To the south of Shenyuan City, there was already a new heaven capital. Li Guangtu hadn't recovered from his injury, and he didn't make a clear statement either. At present, he was already in a state where he was neither close to Jianghu State nor East Island. East Island's patience was gradually running out, while the purgatory of Heaven Capital began to slowly move to Tianan, and the new Heaven Capital was gradually becoming stable. At the lower right of Heaven Capital was Freedom City, where all the superpowers gathered. At present, because there was no absolute ruler, this was also the most chaotic place in Tianan. That was because this was the most chaotic place in the Tianan region. However, even though it was the most chaotic place, the major forces still maintained a certain degree of restraint. Compared to normal times, the situation could still be considered to be stable. Further south, near the border of Annan, Burning City and Raging Fire City were also under construction. The Burning Legion constantly sent soldiers here, and they almost moved their family from Africa to here. They also received strong support from Annan. But compared with Xianyuan City, which was in full swing, the construction of the two cities occupied by the Burning Legion was obviously not satisfactory. There were 6 cities in Tiannan. While other cities were striving for stability and development, Xianyuan City was already on the road of rapid development. It had money, people, and power. In the barren land of Tiannan, Xianyuan City was like a pearl. Everyone could see its existence and understand its future. Xianyuan City had limits. But Emperor Dong's palace wouldn't have limits. When Xianyuan City was established to a certain extent with the support of massive funds, the next step of Emperor Dong's palace would inevitably be expansion. The so-called expansion, whether for Heaven Capital, Freedom City, or the Burning Legion, was tantamount to invasion. Wang Xingxiao's trump card was in Tiannan. Did he want to help Emperor Dong's palace unify Tiannan so that he could get the full support of the giant group? While he was thinking about it, he also asked the question, "Do you think it's feasible?" Wang Xingxiao looked back at him. Wang Jingxi narrowed his eyes, thought for a long time, and then said in a low voice, "This is raising a tiger. Whether it's raised or not, a tiger is a tiger." Wang Xingxiao said blandly, "And if Emperor Dong's palace is a tiger, it's not our turn to raise it now. What we need is cooperation." When a complicated situation became simple, the solution to the problem would also become clear. In the past 6 months, the Giant Group and the Southeast Group had a pleasant cooperation and carried out internal reshuffling. But both sides were very clear that their cooperation would end a year later. At that time, the Giant Group would no longer need the Southeast Group, and they were doomed to go their separate ways. But in the foreseeable future, the Southeast Group still needed the support of the Giant Group. After all, in a turbulent situation, neutrality often meant cowardice, especially in the face of huge interests. Once the Giant Group parted ways with the Southeast Group, it was very likely that they would attack the Southeast Group in the next second. The Southeast Group must unite the Giant Group by its side. The intention of the internal reshuffling of the Giant Group was very clear, and Dong Qingwudi was also very determined. In this case, it was only a matter of time before Li Tianlan left the desert. If he hadn't cooperated with the Southeast Group, Li Tianlan might have come out now. It was said that a month ago Hua Jingyang, the director of Jianghu State, personally visited Li Tianlan in the desert prison and intended to ask him to come out, but Li Tianlan refused. It was not that he couldn't come out, but that he didn't want to come out for the time being. Li Tianlan's freedom couldn't be used as a bargaining chip, so if they wanted to win over the Giant Group, they could only consider Li Tianlan's future. Unify Tiannan. This was a condition that neither Li Tianlan nor the Giant Group could refuse. Although Li Tianlan could also do this without the intervention of the Wang family of Beihai, it would take a longer time. Li Tianlan was only in his 20s this year. Taking over Tiannan in 3 years and taking over Tiannan in 5 years didn't seem to make much difference, but there was still a difference, especially for the future layout of the Giant Group. "I should talk to him," Wang Jingxin said. "Of course, I plan to go to the desert prison in the near future." Wang Xingxiao nodded and smiled. "If you have time, Shun, if I have time, I'll go to see my son." Wang Jingxin took a sip of wine and suddenly said, "What if the target is not Speaker 1? Temporarily?" Wang Xingxiao's eyes were gentle. "Even if it's not, it's only temporarily. They will definitely keep a close eye on this position and won't let it go. So this time, even if it's not Speaker 1, I will still talk to Li Tianlan. This is not the only way, but at present, it seems to be the most effective way." Wang Jingxin nodded silently. It was not easy for the Wang family of Beihai to stabilize the situation now. At their lowest point, what they had to do was to recuperate and keep their bottom line. In this regard, Li Tianlan was their natural ally. This was the same as when he killed Qi Mulin, the Wang family of Beihai took the initiative to help him. The significance of Tiannan to Li Tianlan was exactly the same as the significance of Beihai province to the Wang family of Beihai. Jianghu State could move the speaker of Beihai and threaten the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. In the future, it could move the speaker of Tiannan and threaten the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace and vice versa. But there was a premise. That was the significance of Tiannan to Li Tianlan. It was not the significance of Xianyuan City to Li Tianlan. At least it should not be just Xianyuan City. Everyone understood this truth. Therefore, Wang Xingxiao was still relatively optimistic about the upcoming negotiations. Wang Jingxin drank the wine in the flagon in silence. Suddenly he laughed and changed the topic. "Go to my house when you leave. Your sister-in-law made a few pairs of baby shoes for Haotian. They are very comfortable. Just take them as gifts for the child." "Thank you." Wang Xingxiao laughed. Thinking of his newborn child, his eyes were a little dazed. He had not really seen his child. But the little baby in the video seemed so fragile to him. Wang Xingxiao was very clear that if the Wang family of Beihai could survive the current difficulties, then in the near future, 20 or 30 years later, the very fragile baby would also carry more and more things. Just like his whole life. After standing in this position for hundreds of years, every clan leader seemed to be shouldering far more than what they had obtained. Wang Xingxiao glanced at Wang Jingxin. His eyes were a little tired. At this moment he thought of many people. Many people. The ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai, the names on the stage of formidable person Wang Jingxin in front of him, the 7 major sword-holding families. He thought of himself, Wang Tianzong, Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei. Hundreds of years were like a chessboard. Different people in different eras played different chess pieces on this chessboard. Before walking on the stage of formidable person, Wang Xingxiao felt that it was glory. But sitting on the stage of formidable person for half a year, he began to think again and again whether it was worth it for so many people to sacrifice without complaint or to betray at all costs. He suddenly thought of the night before he left Eastern Europe half a year ago. That night, in Fanio City, he was drinking with his second uncle. Looking at Wang Xiaoyao, who was getting more and more gloomy, he calmly told him that his father's injury was very serious, even at the juncture of life and death. That night, Wang Xiaoyao just drank quietly. It was not until he got on the plane that he said something faintly. An extremely indifferent sentence. Life is like this. Death is death. Death was death. Wang Xingxiao smiled. No one knew what he was thinking at this moment. Death was death. Was it worth it? Chapter 770. There was no sound, no time, no direction, no light, no dream. His consciousness was clearer than ever. He kept falling in the darkness. There seemed to be no end to the falling. There was only darkness and silence around him. And pain. He didn't know when the pain started. At the moment he felt the pain that seemed to tear his whole body had spread all over his body. Was not as if. Was a real pain. That tearing feeling was extremely clear, like the most precise instrument in the world. The instrument enveloped his body, tearing at every corner of his body, inside and out. The cycle repeated endlessly and it was extremely sharp and fierce. His brain, limbs and torso. The pain was everywhere. Every inch of his flesh and blood was torn apart. It was as if thousands of swords were pulling on his body. His skin was torn to shreds, and the swords pierced deep into his flesh, tearing apart his blood vessels. Blood seemed to flow out, and every inch of his muscles was torn apart by the swords. The fine sword intent was not surging. It was not like a big river but like rain. It fell from the sky. Endless rain. The rain-like sword intent kept cutting every bone in his body. The sharp sword energy seemed to penetrate into every cell in his body and finally into his soul. This was a torture more terrible than death by dismemberment. Every minute and every second, his body seemed to be torn apart alive. The absolutely strong willpower made it impossible for him to lose consciousness. The pain that went deep into his soul made him scream and twitch wildly in the darkness, but he couldn't make any sound at all. This darkness seemed to be infinitely vast. It was absolutely silent. There was only darkness. The sound of blood flowing seemed to be an illusion, but it also seemed to be really echoing. The intense pain that made people crazy tormented his heart and mind tenaciously with his heartbeat. The pain had reached the limit. Everything had become numb. The darkness became chaotic. Amidst the long silence, the tearing pain started again. The body that seemed to be cut into powder seemed to be reorganized again, and then it was the most cruel torture. There was no sound, no time, no direction, no coma, no light, no dream. He was falling forever. It was like an eternal sinking. Again and again. He couldn't remember how many times he had been tortured, and he didn't even know how long it had been. 3 days. 3 months. 3 years. Even 3 centuries. Long, desolate, and silent. Countless tortures always came again when his numb body forgot the pain. It was sword intent. The vast and boundless sword intent was close to eternal sword intent. It was like the endless 6 paths of reincarnation, and also like the sharp and fierce 24 moves of sword. Countless sword wills were like tiny runes, like Mount Shu, like the Jade Pool, like the way of swords from all over the world. Yes, the way of the sword. There was no difference in swordsmanship. This was neither the 6 paths of reincarnation nor the 24 moves of sword. This was the pure path of the sword. It was the simplest, but it encompassed everything. That was why it was perfect. The seemingly fine and weak sword intent was wreaking havoc in every part of his body. His powerful life force continued to heal, and then he was torn again and again and then healed again. The sword chi was endless. But his life force was getting weaker and weaker. Under the almost uninterrupted pain, he constantly struggled on the verge of death. After an incomparably long time, he seemed to have forgotten who he was and where he was. Only his survival instinct was still supporting him. Live on, live on. The first wisp of life force poured into this dark space like a sweet spring, like running water. There was more and more running water, more and more rapid, and finally it became a vast ocean. The sword chi did not weaken at all, and it was still constantly circulating. But the healing process of his torn body was constantly speeding up. And the speed of the sword chi tearing his body was a little slower. His body was still falling in the darkness, but he had begun to try his best to control his body. He really tried his best. The pain became even more distinct and unrelenting. His flesh and blood seemed to be gradually merging with the majestic vitality. The speed of the sword chi tearing his body was a little slower again. He didn't know his current state and he didn't even know what his current fall meant. He just wanted to leave this crazy darkness and regain control of his own body. Even if he just moved a finger. He kept trying. In the dark space of eternal fall, a storm of sword intent appeared one after another. The almost world-destroying sword chi did not stir up any waves in the dark space. There was only silence here. Thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times. The truly indestructible will supported him to keep trying, and it eventually became instinct. The sword chi was still endless, raging constantly. When the excruciating pain exceeded a certain limit, he finally felt his broken body. That feeling was not the feeling in the darkness but a very clear perception. The fall stopped. He stood in the darkness, feeling the crazy sword chi raging in his body. His whole body trembled but he could not make a sound. So he stood where he was, feeling the pain, and took a deep breath. Bang! There seemed to be a slight sound in the dark space. The sound was very light, as if it came from a distant place. But in this almost eternal silence, this voice was like a clap of thunder. This was the first sound he heard. Bang! Another sound came. In the darkness, a softness surged over and completely wrapped his body, like a viscous sea. He vaguely remembered a picture. In the cold sea, the great pressure pressed on him like the world. Behind him was the submarine. His body fell on the surface of the deep sea, walking forward step by step. Then what? He tried hard to think. It seemed like it happened a long time ago, but it also seemed like it happened not long ago. Then, in the deep sea he struck with his sword. In the dark and viscous water, he stretched out his palms subconsciously. Where is the sword? The water rippled slowly. In an instant, light appeared in the boundless darkness. A cold and majestic sword gleam. Sword. Countless swords filled the entire darkness with a single thought from him. The pain became clearer. But his mind became extremely calm. He had no choice. In the darkness, the sky was filled with sword shadows. He picked up a sword casually. The blade trembled slightly. When do you plan to go to the desert? On the stage, a formidable person, Wang Jingxin, tidied up the food box and asked, "Don't you want to go with me?" Although he was a high official, he was not good at drinking. He drank a lot tonight, so he was obviously a little drunk. His body looked shaky, but his mind was very clear. "I'll wait here." Wang Xingxiao shook his head. "Now we don't know the specific plan of the other party. If we go to see Li Tianlan rashly, we won't get any results. This is a game, but first we have to see the means of the academics and the Prince Group, estimate the price we and the Giant Group have to pay, and plan an expected result. If everything is within the acceptable range, then the deal can be made. Now how? I can tell Li Tianlan what I can give him, but I can't tell him what he and the Giant Group will lose. Such a cooperation will not work out." Wang Jingxin was silent for a while, then nodded and said, "That's right." Wang Xingxiao chuckled and said, "Well, it's late. Take a rest. If I disturb you, sister-in-law may scold me." Wang Jingxin laughed and waved his hand. "Let's go." Wang Xingxiao nodded and suddenly said, "Before going to Jianghu, go to Yuzhou and see Minister Yi." "Yi Dongxing?" Wang Jingxin was slightly stunned. It was almost certain that Yi Dongxing would become a director next year. If there was no big accident, this result could not be changed. The so-called big accident was that the Wang family of Beihai would be completely destroyed at that time. Compared with the advance and retreat of Wang Qinglei and Wen Xiyuan, deciding Yi Dongxing's position in advance was a means of the Southeast Group to stabilize the situation. Yi Dongxing could be said to be the next flag figure and spiritual leader of the Southeast Group. If she went to see Yi Dongxing at this time, did he have any arrangement? Wang Jingxin looked at Wang Xingxiao with some inquiry in her eyes. Wang Xingxiao answered with a cold voice, "The matter of Jianghu can't be delayed. Get ready." Wang Jingxin's heart trembled. She nodded and said, "I understand." Wang Xingxiao smiled and raised his hand. It seemed that he wanted to shake hands with Wang Jingxin. However, he suddenly stopped moving. A gust of wind blew over the stage of formidable person. It was the highest place in Mount Dibing and there would be sea breeze all the time. But Wang Xingxiao instinctively felt that something was wrong. Because of the wind direction. The east wind passed through. But just at that moment, there seemed to be a reverse flow over the entire Beihai. The west wind wrinkled and was extremely cold. Wang Xingxiao suddenly looked up. The sky was full of stars, the bright moon and the deep night. But everything in his sight became blurred. The whole space seemed to be distorted and the world was in a trance. Wang Jingxin even thought that he had drunk too much. He shook his head hard. Wang Xingxiao tightly pursed his lips and did not speak. He silently raised his head and looked at the distorted heaven and earth. The west wind stopped. There was a sudden dead silence between the heaven and earth. The sword energy, which was so majestic that it could almost fill the heaven and earth, appeared silently over Beihai. It was densely packed. There seemed to be tens of millions of sword energy in the silent night sky in an instant. The sword energy floated quietly. More and more it filled the space between heaven and earth. No one knew the source of the sword energy. The unimaginable sword energy instantly covered Beihai and the entire Mount Dibing. There was a dead silence in the sea area of tens of thousands of meters. Bang! Without any warning, the sword energy that covered the space of tens of thousands of meters suddenly vibrated. It was clear and stable. Supreme and supreme. The vibrating sound instantly spread from the deep sea to the entire Mount Dibing. It was like the heartbeat of the sky. Chapter 771. Yuzhou Hidden Dragon Sea. The warm sunshine sprinkled in the spacious office. Behind the desk, Li Huaqing silently looked at the document in his hand, narrowed his eyes and took a sip of tea. The content of the document was very formal, with the seal of the Wuxia Parliament. It could be said to be a recommendation letter, and it was a recommendation letter that did not go through the normal procedures. Wang Qinglei, the speaker of Wuxia, recommended the deputy governor of Wuxia to be the deputy speaker of a province in western Jianghu state. The provincial parliament was generally not qualified to do so, but Wang Qinglei was different. He was a member of Jianghu state. Therefore, although this recommendation letter had the signatures of most of the directors of Wuxia, it could actually be said that Wang Qinglei proposed a personnel transfer as a member of parliament. This document did not pass through the Ministry of Personnel and appeared directly on Li Huaqing's desk. In just a few hours, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing had received the news. The two sat face to face thinking about the contents of the document, and no one spoke for a while. "What do you think?" Li Huaqing suddenly asked. "We can give it to him." Chen Fangqing didn't hesitate at all. On the way here, he had already thought of everything he needed to think about. Some of the possible consequences were also within his range of tolerance. He's under a lot of pressure now. It's equivalent to asking us for help. Plus, 1 year's time shouldn't be a problem. Wang Tonglu, Li Huaqing looked at the document and whispered to himself. Wang Tonglu was the deputy speaker of Wuxia that Wang Qinglei intended to transfer this time. He was one of the directors of Wuxia. He had served in Wuxia for a long time, deeply rooted and highly respected. With his qualifications, if he wanted to be transferred, it was almost no problem for him to become the governor of a province. He was the backbone of the Southeast Group. If Wuxia had not suffered a major change, he would have been the best candidate to be the governor of Wuxia after Wang Qinglei left Wuxia. In the past year, the internal situation of Jianghu state had changed, especially in the past 6 months. In the turbulent times, Wang Tonglu, who had been favored by others, had become gloomy. The reason was actually not complicated at all. Now Wang Tonglu could be said to be the only capable general of the Southeast Group among the 13 directors of Wuxia. Wang Qinglei could also be said to be a member of the Southeast Group, but everyone knew that he had almost completely fallen out with the Southeast Group. Wang Tonglu was a capable general who was truly loyal to the Southeast Group in Mount Dibing. There were many such capable generals in Wuxia before. However, as Wang Qinglei's actions in Wuxia became more and more intense, such people gradually became fewer and fewer. After Yu Chuanguang, the former mayor of Huading, became the governor of Wuxia, Wang Qinglei was even more free. As a close friend of Wang Xiaoyao, Yu Chuanguang's arrival could be said to be a blessing for Wang Xiao. It was Yao's official statement. He and Wang Qinglei cooperated very well. In a very short time, they had completely cleared out the forces loyal to Mount Dibing. If Wang Tonglu left for the southeast group, Wuxia, the most developed province in Jianghu state that they had held for hundreds of years and had always been their backyard, would be completely lost. This was the core foundation of the southeast group. Li Huaqing hesitated. He was not distressed for the southeast group. In fact, this was their goal, and at this point there was nothing to be distressed about. The southeast group had long lost control of Wuxia, but Wang Tonglu was there, at least he could be regarded as a fig leaf. Beihai and Wuxia were the two most core places of the southeast group. Now, when they were preparing to target Beihai, they wanted to tear off the fig leaf of Wuxia. Li Huaqing felt that they had gone too far. He was the president, so he must take the overall situation into consideration. If this step was so intense, it would undoubtedly cause a backlash from the southeast group, and the loss would undoubtedly outweigh the gain. Qin Fangqing knew his concerns. He hesitated and said slowly, "We still have to promise him. But the direction of Wang Tonglu's office is not very good. Let him be the governor. It is not appropriate to force him out and give him the position of deputy speaker." Li Huaqing nodded slowly. "I will communicate with Comrade Yi Dongxing on this matter later." Qin Fangqing nodded noncommittally. While supporting Wang Qinglei, he also had to take care of the face of the southeast group. The current situation was too sensitive. They had to maintain the situation while attacking. As long as Wang Tonglu could leave, it meant that Wang Qinglei had completely taken over Wuxia. Moreover, they did not have to worry about Wang Qinglei covering the sky in Wuxia for the time being. After all, he only had less than a year. After a year he would come to Yuzhou. At that time, Yu Chuanguang would take advantage of the situation and become the new member and Wuxia's speaker. In this way, Wang Qinglei's faction would have a member and a director. This kind of strength was already a new group that was not weaker than the North group. Therefore, this step of Wang Tonglu's was very crucial. As long as Yi Dongxing agreed, it was okay to give him some benefits to balance the situation. Now the biggest target of the academics was Wuxia and Beihai. Next year the governor of Wuxia was bound to be vacant. Whether the academics would get this position or give it to the prince group would depend on their harvest in Beihai a year later. "We can give it to him." Li Huaqing finally nodded. "But he also needs to speed up his actions." Qin Fangqing nodded, held the cup and said, "I'll talk to him. Beihai's conscription is getting more and more outrageous." Li Huaqing took a deep breath and his tone was a little solemn. Now the scale of the Beihai Corps had doubled, and hundreds of thousands of troops were training all day long. The army could be said to cover the sky and the sun, and the scale of the maneuver was getting larger and larger. These were undoubtedly warnings from Beihai to Jianghu state. Wang Xingxiao's strength at time was not meaningless. At least now, when the academics and the prince group targeted the southeast group again, they had begun to consider how to maintain the situation and take care of their thoughts. In the end it was still the same sentence. Jianghu state versus Beihai. This was not a question of whether they could defeat them or whether they dared to fight. It was a question of whether it was necessary to fight. The answer was very simple. There was no need. There was no need at all. What they wanted was to control Beihai, that was all. But for Wang Xingxiao he had his bottom line. There was no need to talk about the necessity of guarding Beihai. This was also not a question of whether they could defeat them or not, but whether they dared to fight. Wang Xingxiao dared to fight. He really dared to fight. The Wang family of Beihai had always kept a small number of nuclear weapons. The number of nuclear weapons was very small. If they were launched at Jianghu State was 100% sure that it could intercept all the nuclear weapons of Beihai outside Jianghu State, because they really did not have many nuclear weapons. But what if Wang Xingxiao wanted to use them in Beihai? No matter how few nuclear weapons they had, as long as they exploded in Beihai province, it was enough to completely sink 160,000 square kilometers of land in Beihai province to the bottom of the sea. The radiation and aftermath of the explosion could even affect Liaodong, which was closest to Beihai. If they really forced Wang Xingxiao to this point, Beihai province would be completely submerged by the sea and disappear from the map. Liaodong would suffer heavy losses. And what did Jianghu State get? Nothing was gained. This was not their original intention at all. Their original intention was not to destroy Beihai, but to control Beihai province. In this way, when Wang Xingxiao said that he really dared to fight, Jianghu State had to adjust its strategy. When their power expanded to the extent of the Wang family of Beihai, foreign enemies could bring them setbacks, but it was almost impossible to completely destroy them. The only way was to break their rule from the inside. Wang Qinglei. He was the most suitable candidate. As long as Wang Qinglei became the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, then everything could be discussed. Li Huaqing and Qin Fangqing were willing to support Wang Qinglei. But Wang Qinglei also had to do something to put great pressure on the Wang family of Beihai in other aspects. What's his plan? Li Huaqing glanced at Qin Fangqing and asked slowly. Qin Fangqing took a sip of tea and said slowly, I talked to him once before. He told me that in Europe, there is another His Majesty. Chapter 772. The soft light fell on some thin documents. Mellad looked at His Majesty in front of him with a serious expression and silently waited for his orders. This was the underground laboratory in Italos. Every once in a while His Majesty would appear here. Most of the time, this could be regarded as the place where he and Mellad had agreed to meet. The air was heavy and silent. Mellad, who had been waiting for a long time, finally couldn't help but say, Your Majesty, are you going to make a move? What, are you scared? His Majesty chuckled, picked up a peanut on the table and put it into his mouth. In half a year's time, His Majesty's realm seemed to have become more and more unfathomable. The light that enveloped his body was vast and deep, like starlight, but also like clouds and mist. Even though Mellad was an expert who was close to the peak of the invincible realm, he couldn't see through his true appearance when facing him at this time. To be honest, a little. Mellad laughed. He was a little simple and honest. But if your Majesty has an order, I will do it. His Majesty grunted and held the document without saying anything for a while. This was an internal document from the Parliament of Jianghu State. Of course it was a copy, not the original. The original copy had appeared on the desk of the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel of Jianghu State a day ago, and the Ministry of Personnel had sent the document to Wuxia Province as soon as possible, appointing Deputy Governor Wang Tonglu, the director of Wuxia Province, as the governor of a province in Jianghu State. The document had come into effect. A few hours ago Wuxia had already held a farewell party. Wang Tonglu, the backbone of the Southeast Group, had already left Wuxia dejectedly. This also meant that Wang Qinglei and Yu Chuanguang had completely cut off Wuxia from the Southeast Group's hands and firmly controlled it. It had become the core base and base of their new group. Mellad had already read the document. He also knew what this meant. Wuxia was a gift from the Central State Parliament to Wang Qinglei. Vaguely, he was also expressing his support for Wang Qinglei's decision to establish his own sect. After giving such a big gift, Wang Qinglei had to return the favor. Don't worry. His Majesty said slowly, wait a little longer. But preparations must be made. Mellad said softly, besides, the preparation is almost complete. 6 Knights Commanders, 12 Grand Knights, and 200 Knights Templar can set off at any time. Their cooperation with the Church had been completely finalized, and they were the closest long-term allies. The Pope had already fully expressed his trust and welcome to His Majesty. All of this was because of a story that His Majesty had told the Pope half a year ago, or the story the Pope had seen. Therefore, both sides temporarily put down most of their vigilance. After the coronation, His Majesty and Mellad began to reorganize the temple as quickly as possible. This was the bargaining chip they used to trade with the Vatican in Eastern Europe. After Chaos, the head knight of the Knights Templar, had died in the hands of Wang Tianzong in Eastern Europe, the Knights Templar had been in a leaderless state. However, as the spokesperson of the Vatican in the Dark World, the foundation of the Knights Templar was extremely strong. It could be said that it had the structure of a true superpower. Mellad had lost some things in the process of taking over, but he had taken over nearly 70% of the entire Knights Templar. Today, the Knights Templar could almost be said to have broken away from the Vatican and become a close ally of the Vatican. It could be said that it had become a close ally of the Vatican. Mellad's strength was higher than that of Chaos. With His Majesty, although the size of the Knights Templar was a little small, it was no worse than in its heyday. When the undercurrent of the Dark World was surging, no one noticed that an undercurrent lurking around Italos had completely taken shape. It had become a brand new superpower, lurking in the Dark World. Although half a year was not a long time, Mellad had been the vice commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps before. It was not difficult for him to take over the Knights Templar. During this period of time, it was enough for him to win people's hearts and stabilize the foundation. After the internal situation stabilized, the next step was naturally to expand outwards. The brand new Knights Templar needed a real high-profile appearance to tell the whole Dark World of their existence. Mellad had been looking forward to it, but he didn't expect that this appearance would be aimed at the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai? Mellad didn't panic, but he was really a little nervous. But His Majesty and Wang Qinglei had always had a cooperative relationship. Wang Qinglei wanted to give a big gift to the Jianghu State Parliament. His Majesty was the most powerful force he could borrow. Prepare more people. His Majesty said slowly, Wang Qinglei should contact me in the near future. Let the people you have prepared now go to East Island to hide and find an opportunity to test them first. Mellad was stunned, then nodded and agreed. 6 commanders of knights, 12 grand knights and 200 knights Templar. The lineup he had prepared was strong enough. Especially in the Dark World, where there was an extreme shortage of invincible realm experts, this was a power that could turn the world upside down wherever they went. Knights Templar was the foundation of a superpower. The commander of Knights Templar must be an invincible realm expert. And the weakest of the 12 commanders of knights was an expert at the peak of the Thundershocking realm or a half-step invincible realm. The Grand Knights were required to be in the Thundershocking realm. The Knights Templar were the elites of Knights Templar. The Fire-Flaming realm was the foundation, and there were also experts in the Thundershocking realm leading the team. If these forces fought with the Wang family of Beihai, they naturally couldn't win. But their task wasn't to fight. What they needed to do was to put enough pressure on Mount Dibing. When the pressure reached a certain level, the support of Jianghu state would arrive as scheduled. At that time they could take advantage of the situation to retreat. At that time, Jianghu state would have enough reasons to start intervening in the internal affairs of the Wang family of Beihai. Of course, Jianghu state also needed to complete all this through Wang Qinglei, which was equivalent to improving Wang Qinglei's status in Beihai province in a disguised form. Mellad. His Majesty suddenly said, Tell me, what do we need to be worthy of what we are paying now? Mellad narrowed his eyes and there was some excitement in his eyes. Wang Qinglei needed to borrow power, and Knights Templar needed to bleed. Since it was cooperation, Wang Qinglei definitely needed to give enough compensation. There were too many things they needed in the huge Wang family of Beihai. How about a team? Mellad said with some excitement. The glorious team of Knights Templar was one of the things he lost when he integrated Knights Templar. It belonged to the core power of the Vatican. Since Knights Templar no longer belonged to the Vatican, the Pope naturally had to take this part of the power back. Mellad had always been envious of this. The Wang family of Beihai has more than one team. Mellad chuckled and said, Their team is equipped with the world's most advanced fighter jets, which can enhance our strength. It's too petty. His Majesty thought for a moment and said quietly. Mellad froze for a moment and said cautiously, What do you want, Your Majesty? His Majesty was silent for a moment and laughed. I want something he can afford to give, but he absolutely doesn't want to give. Chapter 773. Mellad didn't know what it was that Wang Qinglei could afford to give but absolutely didn't want to give. At the very least it wouldn't be a team. Every superpower had its own team. To put it bluntly, the team was the air power of a superpower. A standard team had 12 fighter jets, 5 armed helicopters, 2 transport planes and an air refueling aircraft. According to different situations when fighting at close range from the base camp, the team would be equipped with missile arrays, luxuriously equipped with stealth reconnaissance aircraft and so on. These big toys were very precious trump cards in the hands of any superpower. But for the Wang family of Beihai, this was definitely not something that could hurt them. The medium-sized aircraft carrier owned by the Beihai Corps was enough to provide countless possibilities for their tactics in the state of war. Therefore, when the superpowers only had 1 or 2 teams, the Wang family of Beihai had a team group, which was not a number that could be included in 1 or 2 teams at all. If it wasn't a team, then what did His Majesty want? Mellad was silent for a while. Just as he was about to speak, the doorbell suddenly rang. His Majesty waved his hand. Mellad walked over and opened the door of the dormitory. Outside the door, a beautiful woman with an extremely numb expression stood there, holding a tray in her hand. Dear Dr. Murphy, I hope you can let me hear the good news I want to hear. His Majesty laughed with some pleasure. Murphy's face suddenly turned pale for a moment. He bit his lip tightly and said in a dry voice, The antidote is still being studied. His Majesty said calmly, Do you have a direction? Yes, but we are still trying. This kind of toxin is very terrible. We can barely suppress its toxin now, but we can't find a solution for the time being. Murphy's voice was a little bitter and anxious. The last time I came here you told me the same thing. I'm a little disappointed. His Majesty said blandly. No, it's different from last time. Dr. Murphy trembled. This time the medicine is more effective than the last time. Your Majesty, I'm really working hard. All right, Murphy. His Majesty waved his hand. You're too nervous. I believe you're working hard enough, but your progress is still too slow. I hope you can remember that your daughter also has this kind of toxin in her body. I can still barely hold on, but your lovely daughter doesn't have much time left. Do you understand? Murphy lowered his voice. He lowered his head, and a look of extreme hatred and fear flashed in his eyes. She took 2 steps forward with the tray and said softly, I understand. His Majesty stretched out his arm, revealing his veins. On the tray was a syringe and a tube of transparent, colorless medicine. Murphy took the syringe and carefully injected the medicine into His Majesty's body. During the whole process, Mellad stood next to His Majesty. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Murphy's every move. His Majesty closed his eyes. As the drug was injected, his body became more and more stiff. Finally, his body completely solidified on the chair. He did not breathe, and even his heart seemed to have stopped beating. Mellad did not say anything. Murphy waited quietly. After some time, His Majesty's body trembled and he let out a long sigh. The cloud of starlight that enveloped him began to circulate continuously, and the traces became more and more natural. Even its scale seemed to have expanded a lot. Mellad slowly relaxed and looked at the starry clouds around His Majesty. There was some awe in his eyes. As an expert who was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm, he naturally knew what this starlight cloud was. This was a domain. It was not a pseudo-domain. It was a domain that was truly flawless and had even surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. The perfection of the domain also represented His Majesty's true realm. However, unlike the super-experts who had really surpassed the peak of the invincible realm, His Majesty's domain could only be maintained in a very small space for some reason. This was undoubtedly His Majesty's biggest weakness. His Majesty slowly stood up, moved his body and sighed comfortably. Go, Murphy. You have 2 hours to spend with your husband and daughter. His Majesty said softly. Murphy bowed deeply and couldn't wait to turn around and leave the dormitory of the laboratory. The door was closed again. His Majesty slowly moved his body and adapted to the strange power. His movements were very slow. But the space of the entire dormitory was slightly distorted as he moved slowly. Mellad. He suddenly spoke in a soft voice. Your Majesty. Mellad took a step forward. His Majesty laughed. After the next injection, maybe my strength will be close to your current level. Your Majesty is too modest even now, Mellad is no match for you. Mellad's voice was very respectful, and it came from the bottom of his heart. His Majesty's strength at his peak had completely surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. Although he was not really supreme, seriously speaking, his strength should be a little stronger than that of Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu in Eastern Europe. He could not compare with Wang Tianzong in the end day of Mormons, but compared with Wang Tianzong before Mormons, he should be on par with him. With such strength, once the domain or sword energy was expanded, it would be enough to cover a distance of 10,000 meters in an instant. His Majesty could not do this now. His domain could only reach its peak within a distance of a few meters around him. But this was not because his strength was not enough, but because of his body. Even if Mellad was close to the peak of the invincible realm now, if he fought with His Majesty in close combat within a distance of a few meters, he would definitely not be a match for His Majesty. Of course, he was not a match for His Majesty in close combat. If he wanted to leave, His Majesty's domain was too small and could not keep him. His Majesty glanced at him and touched Mellad's head with a smile. Mellad maintained his bent posture and lowered his head. These shackles? His Majesty sighed and said, I've been carrying them for too long. Dr. Murphy still has some strength. I believe that she can develop an antidote as soon as possible. As long as the poison in your Majesty's body is removed and your Majesty returns to the peak, we will be the #1 force in the dark world. Mellad said respectfully. There's not much time left. His Majesty said softly, Li Tianlan won't give me too much time and neither will Wang Tianzong. Before Li Tianlan reaches the peak of the invincible realm and before Wang Tianzong recovers from his injury, I must find a way. There must be a way. Mellad said in a deep voice. Of course. His Majesty smiled and narrowed his eyes. As long as he could recover to his peak state before that, with his strength at his peak, he should be able to try to break into the desert prison. Under the suppression of the intensive firepower of the desert prison, he would kill Li Tianlan at the risk of being seriously injured. Then it would be Wang Tianzong. Once the two of them died, he would no longer have any scruples in this era. His Majesty closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It seemed that every cell in his body was carrying a kind of eager power. The communication video suddenly rang. Mellad turned his head and took a look. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Your Majesty, it's Wang Qinglei's communication. Chapter 774. Melad left the room. The communication from afar had been connected, and Wang Qinglei's figure appeared on the screen. His clothes were neat, and his expression was calm and dignified. His Majesty, who was wrapped in starlight clouds and mist, looked at the screen quietly. They were silent for a long time. Wang Tonglu has been transferred away. After an unknown period of time, Wang Qinglei slowly opened his mouth, his voice indifferent. Congratulations, His Majesty said with a chuckle. The last heavyweight in Wuxia who was qualified to resist Wang Qinglei left Wuxia dejectedly. The most developed province in Jianghu state had now completely fallen into Wang Qinglei's hands. It was no exaggeration to say that as long as Wang Qinglei could go further next year, even if he could not reach the top in the end, a new group would have taken shape. With the foundation of Wuxia, it could completely support the continuous development of a new group. This was indeed worthy of congratulation. But the premise was that Wang Qinglei could really improve next year. Wang Qinglei took a deep look at His Majesty and suddenly asked, "Who are you?" This problem had been plaguing him for too long. The cooperation between the two had been going on for a long time. He almost watched the other party turn from an ordinary person with nothing into a giant who could really stand at the peak of the dark world. The cooperation between the two was very obscure, and every time His Majesty made a move, he had a very clear purpose. It turned out that almost all of his plans were successful, so he had more and more chips in his hands. In his eyes, the dark world seemed to be like a chessboard. He kept putting chess pieces on the chessboard, looking careful but inexplicable. The chaos in Eastern Europe became the most critical step. He did not plot against those invincible realm experts, but after a large number of invincible realm experts died, he successfully got Knights Templar. All the accumulation was completely transformed at that moment, allowing him to reach the peak of the dark world in one fell swoop. Wang Qinglei didn't know if His Majesty had any other bargaining chips, but at this moment in his heart, His Majesty was almost the strongest person in the dark world. Whether it was his personal strength or the power he held in his hands. The other party definitely had more than just temple. In fact, the temple was only a part of their strength that they had purposely revealed. If Wang Qinglei did not know his true identity, he would not have dared to cooperate with him. This was also the main reason why he had hesitated to contact the other party until now. Is it important? His Majesty chuckled. His voice was very gentle, as if he would never be impatient. Very important. Wang Qinglei nodded seriously and said in a deep voice. No, I think it's more important if you can improve next year. His Majesty said with a smile. Wang Qinglei fell silent. Relatively speaking, this was indeed the most important matter. The attitude of the academics and the prince group to support him was extremely obvious. Wu Yu had been transferred frequently in the past 6 months, and it was almost clear. When the Southeast group reshuffled internally, the first one they thought of was Wu Yu. They also hoped that Wang Qinglei would be alone in Wu Yu. That was the most dangerous period for Wang Qinglei. He went to Yuzhou to meet Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing to express his attitude. In the end, the two groups joined hands to withstand the pressure of the Southeast group. At the same time, they also made a lot of concessions. The premise of the Southeast group's smooth shuffle was to give up Wu Yu. Now, Wang Qinglei could be said to have his own base camp, and all of this came from the support of the academics and the prince group. In other words, at this time next year, even if he could go further, he would still be the leader of the Southeast group in name, but in fact, he could already be said to be a member of the academics and the prince group. And the two groups gave him such great support, Wang Qinglei must give something in return. Although a director was important compared to the Southeast group, it was not particularly important. Therefore, the academics and the prince group could accept Wang Qinglei swinging between them because their current interests were the same, which was to take over the Southeast group. After they divided up the Southeast group, it was estimated that Wang Qinglei would retire at that time. Naturally, there was no need to worry about these things. Wang Shengshao had made it clear that he would never compromise. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Jianghu state could only strive to break through their position from the inside. Wang Qinglei was the most suitable candidate. Therefore, everyone was very clear that Wang Tonglu's transfer meant that Wang Qinglei completely controlled Wu Yu. And after having his own base, Wang Qinglei must take action against the Wang family of Beihai, put pressure on Beihai from the inside, and even create a real breakthrough for Jianghu state. The first person Wang Qinglei thought of was His Majesty. What do you want? Wang Qinglei took a deep breath and temporarily stopped thinking about His Majesty's identity. His identity. Since it was cooperation, he must give His Majesty something. After all, the other party was not obliged to help. Ha! His Majesty smiled and said, I should say, what do you need me to do now so that I can make a price, right? Attack Beihai province. Wang Qinglei said calmly, invade from all sides, make Beihai province completely chaotic, spread rumors, reduce the control of Mount Dibing over the people of Beihai, weaken the combat capability of the Beihai Corps, and get the technology of Mount Dibing. I only have one requirement, chaos. He paused and said seriously, the more chaotic, the better. Do you want Wang Xingxiao to take the initiative to ask for help from Jianghu state when he can't hold on? His Majesty's tone was playful. Wang Qinglei did not speak. In fact, Wang Xingxiao's attitude was not within his consideration. After all, Beihai was a part of Jianghu state. When Beihai province was chaotic to a certain extent, Jianghu state could take the initiative to intervene in the affairs of Beihai. It was useless even if Wang Xingxiao disagreed. Last time Jianghu state forced the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xingxiao could react violently. This time Beihai was in internal chaos, and Jianghu state took the initiative to help. Would Wang Xingxiao dare to react violently? If he dared to do so, it would be treason. Can you do it? Wang Qinglei asked calmly. His Majesty was silent for about a minute. 4 invincible realm experts, 40 thundershocking realm experts, and more than 500 fire-flaming realm experts. His voice slowly sounded across the screen, like a bloody storm. This is a conservative estimate. Do you think it's enough? 4 invincible realm experts. How many invincible realm experts were there in the entire dark world now? Wang Qinglei's heart suddenly shook, and his face looked a little pale. This kind of lineup, it was not a question of whether it was enough or not, but how much did he have to pay if the other side sent out such a lineup? What do you want? Wang Qinglei asked again. What do you want to give me? His Majesty asked back. Wang Qinglei looked at the screen expressionlessly and said nothing. His Majesty chuckled, looked at the screen and said calmly, I want Beihai. Or Kunlun City. Choose one of the two. Which one will you choose? Or how will the Parliament choose? Chapter 775. Wang Qinglei didn't speak for a long time. He stood in front of the screen, and his firm and calm expression was like a rock, but the obvious rise and fall of his breath still revealed his mood. He even thought he had heard wrong. Beihai, Kunlun City. Choose one of the two? This was simply the most absurd request he had ever heard, and it was also the most naked ambition he had ever seen. His Majesty sat down on a reclining chair opposite the screen and slowly leaned against the back of the chair. The chair shook slightly and made a slight sound. His fingers unconsciously tapped the armrest of the chair, and his voice was neither arrogant nor impatient. How should I choose? Are you crazy? Wang Qinglei said incredulously. His Majesty laughed, and the starlight cloud floated slightly around him. His voice sounded a little indifferent. Likewise, you want to reach the top after leaving the southeast group. I want Beihai or Kunlun City. What's the difference? Do you know what you're talking about? Wang Qinglei suppressed his anger and asked word by word. He was indeed shocked by His Majesty's strength. 4 invincible realm experts and dozens of thundershocking realm experts. Not to mention now, even before Eastern Europe, this kind of lineup was not something that any force could come up with. No, strictly speaking, no force could come up with so many experts, including the Wang family of Beihai. Before Eastern Europe, the Wang family of Beihai only had one invincible realm expert, Wang Tianzong. Even if Heaven's Saber DK was counted, there were only 2 of them. Of course, these 2 people had the strength to kill all 4 invincible realm experts, but this did not mean that invincible realm experts were cabbages. Now that all the experts at the peak of the invincible realm were silent, there were less than 10 people in the entire dark world with peak combat capability, including several newly promoted invincible realm experts. His Majesty could mobilize 4 of them. This number might include himself, but it was enough to shock people. But Wang Qinglei was more shocked by the other party's appetite. You want Beihai, but it's better to be in our hands than in your hands. What the Parliament wants is Beihai. Where do you get the courage to snatch things from the Parliament of Jianghu State? Wang Qinglei said in disbelief. The game between the Parliament of Jianghu State and the Wang family of Beihai could be said to be fruitful at present. But strictly speaking, even if they lost Wuxia, the Wang family of Beihai would not really suffer a serious injury. The game between the 2 sides was destined to be a very long process. 10 years, 20 years, or even longer. Everyone involved in it was prepared to fight a protracted war. The most important reason was the Wang family of Beihai, or the Wang family of Beihai in Jianghu State. His Majesty actually wanted the North Sea. Not to mention how likely it was, even if he really got Beihai, how could he face Jianghu state? The current game was only an internal problem of Jianghu state, so it needed to be discussed, compromised, and balanced. If a foreign force like His Majesty occupied Beihai, it would be an invasion. There was no game at all. Jianghu state did not need to hesitate at all and would directly send troops to destroy everything His Majesty had. 4 invincible realm experts were indeed terrible, but in the face of the most powerful hegemon country in the world, even if you had 40 invincible realm experts, what could you do? You want to enter Mount Dibing? Wang Qinglei's expression was completely cold. He did not know if His Majesty was crazy, but even if he was, he would not agree to this condition. Beihai. Kunlun City. One was the territory that Jianghu state wanted to completely control the most, and the other was the special warfare center of Jianghu state. He would not choose either and he could not choose either. Don't get me wrong. His Majesty smiled and said, I'm just talking about Beihai, not Mount Dibing. It's Beihai in history. Beihai in history. Wang Qinglei's eyes narrowed, and he finally understood the other party's intention. The so-called history of the other party had never been recognized by Beihai province, but this history was not strange at all because people often mentioned it. And it was not a person who often mentioned this history but a country. East Island. Beihai in their eyes was completely in the past. It was the North Island that once belonged to them hundreds of years ago. In the territory of Beihai province today, it was the south of Kanglin River. The areas of Kanglin, Tongtian, and Qiushui occupied half of the area of Beihai province. What His Majesty wanted was precisely this half of the North Sea province. Wang Qinglei's expression was cold. He had cooperated with His Majesty several times, and they had always been very happy. But this time, His Majesty's appetite was completely beyond his expectation. He did want to reach the top in Jianghu state, and he also wanted to take the position of the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, but it did not mean that he could tolerate the other party's bottomless destruction of Beihai. That was his Beihai province. He could cooperate with His Majesty to make him go to Beihai to cause chaos, and he could also work with the academics and the prince group to break up the current Beihai. That was because he knew that after he reached the top, he could reverse the situation and reach an agreement with Jianghu state again. Now, if he gave half of Beihai to the other party, he would be the eternal sinner of the Wang family of Beihai. He wanted to be the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. How could he be willing to see Beihai divided in his hands? I don't want to. Wang Qinglei's voice was cold. He would rather give up this cooperation than answer. His Majesty's condition. As for the Kunlun city that the other party wanted, that was not something he could decide. I'm afraid it's not up to you. His Majesty said slowly. Don't forget, this is Jianghu state. Wang Qinglei said coldly. But it's not your Jianghu state yet. His Majesty's tone did not fluctuate at all. I can bypass you and talk to Jianghu state. What do you think they will choose? Why do you think Jianghu state will agree to you? Wang Qinglei sneered and said, This is the territory of Jianghu state. I'm also from Jianghu state. His Majesty said blandly, If I control Beihai, I will form a closer relationship with Jianghu state. I know what I want, what I can rely on, and what I can bring to Jianghu state. Why won't Jianghu state agree? Everyone is plotting Beihai. After they succeed, they also need someone to manage it. I'm from Jianghu state, not some foreign force. My force can naturally be called the force of Jianghu state. After I take Beihai and divide the Beihai province, I can withstand the pressure of Mount Dibing and make the two groups more relaxed. Why won't they agree? His Majesty smiled and continued, The most important thing is that I will be more obedient than the Wang family of Beihai. My Beihai is a part of Jianghu state, a part that really belongs to Jianghu state. Wang Qinglei's face twisted and became more and more ugly. Jianghu state can't trust you at all. Trust takes time, but cooperation only needs benefits. So far, I haven't done anything wrong to Jianghu state. As a Jianghu state person, as long as there is a basis for cooperation, Jianghu state can naturally see my position clearly. His Majesty said calmly, At present, Jianghu state seems to lack a dark force that specializes in overseas affairs. Kunlun city is no longer useful. Li Tianlan's future is in Tiannan. As long as the parliament allows me to expand in the name of Jianghu state, I can bring unimaginable benefits to Jianghu state. Wang Qinglei was completely silent. He knew very well that as long as His Majesty was sincere, Jianghu state would not refuse such cooperation, and there was no reason to refuse. In front of the screen he lit a cigarette. After smoking most of it, he said in a hoarse voice, "In that case, what do you still want from me?" His Majesty looked at him for a long time, then said with a smile, "In fact, it was you who asked me. Wang Qinglei, I will communicate with Jianghu State." His Majesty's voice was gentle. "But for the sake of you taking the initiative to find me, I can give you a chance. After I take Beihai, you can exchange Kunlun City with me." Chapter 776. Life in the desert prison was like stagnant water, boring and repetitive. There was nothing new, only new stories. The story came from Zhou Tong. It was about his experience in most of his life. Li Tianlan's life was still the same. He meditated every day thinking about how to enter the invincible realm. But there was one more thing in his leisure time, which was to chat with Zhou Tong. Li Tianlan regarded it as a class. And Zhou Tong regarded it as a memory of his life. His life in his 70s could be said to be magnificent. Deep in the prison, he could still make his family a core part of the prince group. This old man really had too many stories and too much experience. Li Tianlan was very young. So what he lacked most was experience. Looking at the future, the rise of Emperor Dong's palace was almost unstoppable, so Li Tianlan had to learn how to be a qualified leader. Zhou Tong was the best teacher. He didn't have to teach Li Tianlan specific means, but he used to be in a high enough position to teach Li Tianlan what to do when standing at the top, what kind of mind and vision he should have. Zhou Tong was not the only person that Li Tianlan planned to bring out of the desert prison. There were 9 people on the list that Qin Weibai had sorted out, and Zhou Tong was just one of them. Li Tianlan recently paid attention to the status of the 9 people. 2 of them were dead and 2 of them had become a little delirious. Li Tianlan observed the last one. After learning about his past through Xiao Mahai, he finally decided that he was not trustworthy, or in other words, he did not have the conditions that he could use with confidence. In this way, there were only 4 people on the list in his hand. Zhou Tong was one. The other was a Chinese from Annan State. Before entering the prison, he was the head of a large intelligence organization. The intelligence coverage covered more than half of Southeast Asia and Jianghu State. At its peak, it even extended its tentacles to Snow Country. It had been nearly 10 years since he was arrested in Jianghu State for selling intelligence of Jianghu State. The other 2 were second-to-none financial tycoons in Jianghu State before entering the prison, but they eventually became the stepping stones of the Flourishing Age Fund. It could even be said that they were the most important stepping stones since the rise of the Flourishing Age Fund. When they were driven to desperation by Han Donglu, they secretly accepted the capital injection of overseas consortiums and signed a series of agreements full of insider information. One of them was arrested and the other surrendered. It had been nearly 10 years since they were in prison. Li Tianlan didn't need any super masters in martial arts. Nowadays there were at least 30 Thundershocking Realm masters locked up in the desert prison, and the worst one was close to the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. But Li Tianlan couldn't afford to use this group of people at all. They were either the regional heads of a large force or the ace agents of a country. They were different from the people on Li Tianlan's list. Not to mention Zhou Tong, even the head of the intelligence agency was neutral before entering the prison. After so many years, their value had basically been squeezed out, and such people were not indispensable in relatively mature forces. Under the right opportunity, Li Tianlan could take them out and it wouldn't touch the nerves of the parliament of Jianghu State. The identity of those ace agents was too sensitive. Even if they had been locked up for many years, Li Tianlan didn't think he could change their stand. The most important thing was that although they were strong, their potential had long been exhausted after being locked up for many years. They weren't worth investing in. As for those who had just come in, they were even less trustworthy. Such people were of little value to Li Tianlan. The current lineup of Emperor Dong's palace was enough to support their expansion. What Li Tianlan needed the most now were these masters who were difficult to completely control. Zhou Tong's class time was about 3 hours a day. After that, Li Tianlan would chat with the other 3 people. The person in charge of the intelligence organization, codenamed Mr. Black, was the focus of his attention recently. Emperor Dong's palace now had its own intelligence organization. But because it had been established for a short time, although it didn't lack resources, it was still a little stiff in operation. Therefore, Mr. Black had already made contact with Shenyuan City and contacted the outside world. When Li Tianlan walked into Mr. Black's dormitory, Mr. Black just hung up the video call from Shenyuan City. When he saw Li Tianlan, he was stunned. Then he stood up and said respectfully, "Your Highness." Li Tianlan nodded. "What are you busy with today?" "I'm studying the current topographic map and future planning of Shenyuan City." Mr. Black said with a smile, I've recently learned about the situation in Tiannan. Shenyuan City's development prospects are very good. Your Highness wants to set up an intelligence organization. Personally, I think it's secondary to get intelligence on the other side. The first thing we need to do is to make sure we don't lose our own intelligence. Shenyuan City is our base camp. We should be able to see even the slightest movement in Shenyuan City. Come on, Li Tianlan said slowly. Now the intelligence agency of Emperor Dong's palace was controlled by Tianyin, who had left the purgatory of heaven capital. As an old man of the Li family and an old man that Li Tianlan was very familiar with, Li Tianlan never doubted him. Mr. Black nodded. He hesitated for a moment and said softly, Your Highness, I should be able to find some people from Dark Pupil after I get out. They are also very familiar with Southeast Asia. I don't know if Your Highness needs them. If you do, I can let them join Emperor Dong's palace. The intelligence organization that Mr. He had founded was called the Dark Eye. At its peak, the Dark Eye was a famous intelligence organization in the entire Dark World. After Mr. He was captured, the Dark Eye fell apart, but there were always some experienced backbones who remained loyal to him. No matter how many of them there were, they could increase the intelligence power of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan said, Let's talk about it later. He slowly turned around and left Mr. Black's room. The other two financial giants were studying the current financial situation. Li Tianlan stopped in front of their door, but he didn't go in. He walked to the gate of the prison. The gate opened slowly. It was dusk in the desert. The light of the setting sun shone on the yellow sand of the desert. It was silent and desolate. Li Tianlan walked to the gate and sat down. He looked at the sky in the distance and said nothing. Only the dark and exquisite Shenyuan sword was slowly rotating around him. Li Tianlan was like a statue. He would come here every day to sit for a while, but what he saw was always the yellow sand and the setting sun. The sun slowly set. Darkness shrouded the desert, and the temperature began to drop. Your Highness. A clear voice sounded beside Li Tianlan. A touch of delicate fragrance appeared beside Li Tianlan. Xiao Qing, who was brought to the desert prison by her father Xiao Mahai, before she graduated, quietly sat down beside Li Tianlan. She wore a very pure white dress, and her snow-white calf leaned against Li Tianlan's leg intentionally or unintentionally. Li Tianlan didn't move. He just said yes. Are you waiting for someone? Xiao Qing asked carefully. She sat close to Li Tianlan and stared at his side profile. A very attractive blush appeared on the face of the girl who had just turned 20. No. Li Tianlan shook his head. Xiao Qing thought about it and lit a cigarette for him. She looked at Li Tianlan with a lighter in one hand and her cheek in the other. She whispered, You look very lonely. I'm not lonely. Li Tianlan said faintly, just a little lonely. He looked at the sky in the distance. It was the night and the stars. At night in the desert, heaven and earth seemed to be frozen, without any vitality. Xiao Qing's face became redder. Her voice trembled with a touch of temptation. Your Highness, I can accompany you tonight. Li Tianlan glanced at her, shook his head and said, Let's go eat. Chapter 777. It rarely rained in the desert. The temperature in the prison was slightly lower than usual. Unlike the outside world, raindrops fell from the sky. Most of the raindrops evaporated before they hit the ground. Water vapor drifted in the air, and only a few raindrops fell on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan sat quietly in front of the desert prison, looking at the distant sky. His heart was as still as water, motionless. When disappointment had become the norm, all the emotions in his heart seemed to gradually turn into numb silence. The sky gradually darkened. The vast expanse of water vapor rose in the air. The darkness swallowed his figure in the night. Li Tianlan reached out and picked up the Shenyuan sword spinning around him. He reached out and rubbed the delicate blade, his eyes as quiet as the starry sky in the desert. He would sit in front of the prison gate every day for more than a month. At this time, Xiao Mahai, as the warden, would quietly guard near Li Tianlan. Sometimes he would stand for hours or even half a day. He always felt that Li Tianlan was waiting for something. But for more than a month, there was no response from his waiting. Xiao Mahai could not feel Li Tianlan's anger and disappointment, but he could clearly sense that Li Tianlan was getting quieter and quieter, as if he had completely suppressed all his emotions in his heart. The twilight on the horizon disappeared completely. Darkness enveloped the desert. The light in front of the prison gate lit up. Li Tianlan sat on the edge of the light with his back to Xiao Mahai. His shadow was long in the light, looking lonely and cold. Xiao Mahai looked at his watch and hesitated. Finally, he couldn't help but walk over and whispered, "Your Highness, are you waiting for someone?" "No." Li Tianlan lowered his head and looked at the Xian Yuan sword running between his fingers. His voice was as calm as water. Xiao Mahai gave a hollow laugh. Li Tianlan had been here for more than a year, but Xiao Mahai did not establish a close relationship with him. Instead, he was more in awe of Li Tianlan. Because he had not figured out Li Tianlan's temper, he was naturally more cautious when getting along with him. He looked at the distant sky and whispered, "Then, shall we go eat first?" "I'm not hungry." Li Tianlan did not look up. "Old Zhou made a few new dishes today. Your Highness should like them, no?" Li Tianlan stood up and loosened his palm. The Xian Yuan sword rotated slowly around him, like a planet around a star. "I'm going out for a walk," Li Tianlan said. Xiao Mahai was stunned and didn't come back to his senses for a while. Go for a walk? In more than a year, the furthest he had walked was the distance from his dormitory to the prison gate. He had never left the confines of the prison. This was the first time he said he wanted to go out for a walk. By the time Xiao Mahai came to his senses, Li Tianlan had already walked more than 10 meters away. He hesitated for a moment and didn't say anything. He just sighed softly. He still didn't notice Li Tianlan's anger and disappointment. But he could feel that Li Tianlan was in a bad mood. "Dad, where is His Highness going?" Xiao Qing trotted over and asked. "Your Highness is not in a good mood. Let's go for a walk." Xiao Mahai shook his head. "Inform the kitchen to prepare a few dishes that His Highness likes. When he comes back, quickly make another portion." "Oh," Xiao Qing said, watching his back getting farther and farther away. A gust of wind blew in the desert at night. The rain stopped. Water vapor slowly floated all over the sky. As Li Tianlan walked, there seemed to be a thin layer of mist between heaven and earth, vague and indifferent. This picture was very beautiful. Xiao Qing's eyes were a little obsessed. The light behind him faded away and eventually disappeared completely. The white mist full of vitality floated densely, but it didn't affect Li Tianlan's sight at all. The seemingly illusory white mist blocked the yellow sand that was blown up by the wind. Between heaven and earth, there was silence, and desolation. Loneliness and boredom seemed to go deep into the bone. Li Tianlan walked forward quietly with no expression on his face. He didn't know where he was going, nor what he wanted to do. The depression in his heart had changed from the initial torrent to the deep sea, constantly fluctuating in his heart, and even destroying his state of concentration more than once. In more than half a year, his sleep time was getting less and less. The deep meditation on weekdays had almost completely replaced his sleeping time. His will was constantly condensing in meditation, and his swordsmanship was also advancing by leaps and bounds. This kind of practice could hardly be said to be painstaking but even desperate. No one knew why. Li Tianlan never told anyone that he had dreamed of Qin Weibai countless times in the past 6 months. At first, it was the bits and pieces of their acquaintance. The continuous dreams were long and clear. From the first acquaintance to knowing each other, to the promise to keep each other. Everything, every picture, every word, and every look were constantly repeated in the dream. That figure had really gone deep into the soul, and then began to extend in different directions in the facts of the dream. He dreamed of growing old with Qin Weibai. He dreamed of falling out with Qin Weibai. He dreamed of parting with Qin Weibai. Countless dreams. He would meet many people in the dream and finally all of them became Qin Weibai. He dreamed that Qin Weibai gave birth to a son for him. The dream changed and the son became a daughter. He dreamed that Qin Weibai stood at the top and looked down at the heroes in the world. He dreamed that he passed by Qin Weibai countless times and finally became strangers. In the dream, he ignored Qin Weibai's struggle and curses, tearing her clothes. On a snowy night, in the vast world of ice and snow, the bright sword blade pierced into his chest. Chaos. Every dream was extremely clear. Every dream had a different ending. The yearning turned into longing, surging up like a tide. Li Tianlan wanted to ask, why? He wanted to see Qin Weibai. He wanted to ask why he couldn't see her. He didn't think there was anything wrong between them. The last time they met, there was no anger or quarrel between them. There was no then. He had called her, but every time, it was Horsewoman who answered the phone. Horsewoman either said she was busy or she was not there. Li Tianlan forgot how many times he had called. But Qin Weibai never responded. Gradually, Li Tianlan also fell silent. For more than a year, the man and woman who used to love each other didn't contact each other even once. He had asked the military counselor this question before. But more than a month later there was still no answer. He was indeed waiting for someone. But for more than a month, he seemed to be waiting for someone who couldn't wait. Why on earth? Li Tianlan stopped and sat down in the desert. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was no light in the desert. The shining galaxy above the sky was incomparably bright. Li Tianlan was in a daze. He wrote the 3 words Qin Wei Bai on the yellow sand with his finger. Recalling the bits and pieces of the two of them together, he became more and more silent. Time was passing. The darkness was passing. The desert was silent. It seemed that he was the only one left in the world. The past seemed to have really become the past rooted in his memory. Li Tianlan smiled. He didn't know why, but he just wanted to laugh. I've seen the rainstorm sweep the desert. I've seen the galaxy cover the moonlight. I've seen the dusk chase the dawn. I want to see you, but I can't see you. Why? Li Tianlan gently tapped the Shen Yuan sword. Why do you think? The delicate blade of the Shen Yuan sword swayed slightly in front of Li Tianlan, as if shaking its head. I'm not happy, Li Tianlan said lightly. The Shen Yuan sword circled around Li Tianlan as if thinking. Its exquisite blade suddenly trembled. A subtle but extremely sharp sword energy appeared in the yellow sand, sweeping away a large area of white fog. At this moment, Li Tianlan clearly sensed a complex and obscure will. It seemed to be a test but also an inquiry. The Shen Yuan sword was eager to have a try. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and laughed. He nodded. Okay. The Shen Yuan sword suddenly let out a sword cry. In an instant, the violent sword energy burst out from its delicate blade. At this moment, the desert was no longer lonely. Above the yellow sand there was soaring fighting intent everywhere. Li Tianlan slowly stood up, looked at the constantly shaking Shen Yuan sword and said calmly, "Make your move." Chapter 778. As the core of the 13th floor, Shen Yuan sword was a weapon, but it was a real weapon with its own life. It had its own thoughts and emotions, and the energy it absorbed on a daily basis could be regarded as its vitality. That kind of thinking could be transmitted through the sword intent. Although it couldn't speak, it could always carry out simple communication with Li Tianlan. The sword was cold. It couldn't comfort people. Or the only comfort it could give Li Tianlan was fighting. After swallowing the 4 murderous weapons, the sword energy of Shen Yuan's sword became more majestic and agile. It could be said to be Li Tianlan's best opponent. This was also the road to the invincible realm that Li Tianlan had prepared for himself. Because Shen Yuan's sword was a life, but it was also a sword. It was pure enough so its sword energy was perfect and truly balanced. In other words, with Li Tianlan's current physical state, if Shen Yuan's sword broke out with all its strength, it was enough to beat Li Tianlan. You are unhappy, lonely and cold. That's not a problem. I've beaten you once. Why do you still think about those messy things? If one time is not enough, then do it again. That was the idea of Shen Yuan's sword. The energy of the 4 murderous weapons was continuously instilled into Shen Yuan's sword and transformed into sword energy. Dongqing Wujin consciously strengthened the speed of filling energy for Shen Yuan's sword. In this state, Shen Yuan's sword could completely press Li Tianlan to the ground and rub him as much as it wanted. Li Tianlan's body straightened. The white mist around him surged wildly and was quickly absorbed by his body. He reached out to Shen Yuan's sword. Boom! A roar suddenly broke out in the silent desert. The dark night was almost completely illuminated in an instant. The delicate blade of Shen Yuan's sword continued to expand and became a big sword more than 2 meters high. The sword energy flew and rotated, directly enveloping Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan suddenly clenched his fists. The flying yellow sand quickly gathered in the violent sword intent and converged into an extremely slender long sword. Sand gathered into a sword. Li Tianlan held the hilt. The sword energy exploded. In the harsh buzzing sound, his figure disappeared for a moment, and when he reappeared, he was directly in front of Shen Yuan's sword. The frenzied sword light soared into the sky. The dazzling light dispelled the night in an instant. The Shen Yuan sword rose into the sky, and countless sword chi swirled wildly, turning into a tornado. The tornado completely enveloped Li Tianlan, and the sword chi kept falling from all directions. The sand sword in Li Tianlan's hand was directly smashed by the sword energy. Circumference number in the blink of an eye, the space within 100 meters boiled. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere. Everything in the surroundings was occupied by the sword chi. Without a sword in his hand, Li Tianlan made a gesture with both hands. Myriad limitless seal. The amazing destructive power was still condensing, and the Shen Yuan sword in the air had already fallen straight down. The 2-meter-long sword expanded again, turning into a 10-meter-long giant sword. The yellow sand in the sky swirled upward for a moment with Li Tianlan as the center. The Xianyuan sword, surrounded by sword energy, had already appeared beside Li Tianlan. The huge sword rotated slightly. With a dull whistling sound, Li Tianlan's body was sent flying. The huge sword body of the Xianyuan sword kept shaking, and the sound of the sword was endless. In Li Tianlan's sight, the sword light that filled the sky and the earth was getting brighter and brighter, but the range was getting smaller and smaller. The sword energy within a radius of hundreds of meters seemed to be condensing toward the Xianyuan sword. Li Tianlan's body landed on the yellow sand and slowly got up. The invisible sword energy was compressed to the extreme as soon as he stood up. The Xianyuan sword disappeared. A dazzling light spot suddenly burst out from the position of the Xianyuan sword, like a sword light, instantly illuminating the night sky. The light was so dazzling that it could be seen clearly even in the desert prison dozens of miles away. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. The huge sword body of the Xianyuan sword had fallen into nothingness in his perception. The dazzling sword light in front of him also seemed to be nothingness. But in the nothingness of the sword light, a clear sound of footsteps slowly rang out. The footsteps were very light, stepping on the yellow sand. There was an indescribable sharpness and danger in the sound. A figure walked out of the sword light step by step. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly. The Xianyuan sword had disappeared. The one who walked out of the sword light turned out to be another Li Tianlan. Or rather, it was Li Tianlan condensed by the sword energy of the Xianyuan sword. A little interesting. Li Tianlan laughed. Similar to the sword energy doppelganger, Li Tianlan's expression was calm and indifferent. There was no sound and he was as quiet as a ghost. He raised his palm. It was the move that Li Tianlan was most familiar with. The first blade, Wuxia. The pure and bright sword light suddenly turned into a natural arc of light in his hand. The arc of light flashed and arrived in an instant. Bang! Li Tianlan's feet stepped heavily on the ground, and a loud dragon roar suddenly sounded. The desert within dozens of meters kept roaring, and the yellow sand rising into the sky turned into giant dragons one after another. Li Tianlan's body strode forward and rose into the air. One after another, the giant dragons followed Li Tianlan and rushed forward with the yellow sand all over the sky. The huge arc of sword energy was torn apart by pure force when the giant dragons rose. Li Tianlan's body was getting taller and taller, and his limbs were stretched to the extreme. He fiercely smashed toward his other self on the ground like a cannonball. The fifth blade, flying snow. The figure condensed by the sword energy of Xianyuan sword rose into the sky. The rain in the desert had stopped not long ago. The water vapor in the sky was constantly condensed in the sword intent. There was a clear sound of condensation in the air. A large area of ice imprisoned a large area of yellow sand dragons. Li Tianlan had landed from the air. Dragon fist, flying dragon in the sky. Crack. The huge and thick ice layer was smashed by a punch. The pale lightning burst out from Li Tianlan's body. His figure smashed the ice layer and the sword energy doppelganger in an instant. The blade of Xianyuan's sword appeared for a moment. Without the slightest hesitation, Li Tianlan directly reached out and grabbed the hilt. Xianyuan's sword, which was about the same size as Li Tianlan, almost instinctively quieted down for a moment. Then it seemed to remember that it was a battle, and the dark sword began to shake violently. Li Tianlan held the hilt tightly. The huge power of the dual wind and thunder veins all fell on Xianyuan's sword. Li Tianlan's figure was as steady as a rock. His face was a little pale, but his smile was extremely happy. I won. Crack. Before he could finish speaking, the exquisite Xianyuan sword suddenly shattered. The sword energy that seemed to be several times more terrifying than before broke out in an instant. The broken Xianyuan sword directly left Li Tianlan's control. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth suddenly twitched. Looking at the scene in front of him, he fell completely silent. Xianyuan's sword became an extremely delicate small sword again. The dark sword body floated in the air. But it was not alone. 4 small swords suddenly appeared beside Xianyuan's sword and slowly rotated around him, like stars surrounding the moon. Li Tianlan looked at the 4 small swords that suddenly appeared in silence. Every one of them seemed to be familiar. But he didn't know any of them. But every one of them seemed to have an inseparable connection with him now. They floated around Xianyuan's sword and formed a whole. They seemed to be observing Li Tianlan curiously. Li Tianlan was in a trance. At this moment he suddenly thought of a conversation in Yuzhou. The conversation between him and Li Guangtu. Chapter 779. How do you know that I've been to the Wang family of Beihai? If you haven't been to the Wang family of Beihai, How did you get it? You mean this sword is from Beihai? Do you still think it's a sword? You grabbed it and turned it into a sword, and then you can really deceive yourself into thinking that it's your sword? If it's not a sword, what is it? It's not a sword. It's the human emperor. The sword light diffused, the yellow sand fell, and the memory replayed. Li Tianlan seemed to return to the hospital in Yuzhou, facing Li Guangtu, who had just woken up. Every single word of the conversation between the two of them resounded clearly in his mind. It's not a sword. It's the human emperor. Li Tianlan lowered his head and looked at the Xinyuan sword in his hand. He thought of Xinyuan Feng shining with eternal light over Mormons. That was the most complete form of Xinyuan sword. Silver moon, Qingguang, graceful, azure, horizon, twilight, void, judgment, phantom, magic weapon, East Emperor, heartbreaker, and Xinyuan. When the 13 swords were combined together, it was the complete Xinyuan Feng, which was also the sword formation of the 13-story building. This was an invincible sword formation. Its life, breathing, and every movement were the most perfect sword will. Li Tianlan never knew why Xinyuan Feng had its own life and will. This kind of life and will was so clear and powerful. Holding Xinyuan Feng in the sword formation of the 13-story building, Li Tianlan really felt that he was facing a living life. The other party could express its own thoughts and will, but it couldn't speak. Such a sword was really a living thing. Li Tianlan had never figured out why. Whether in terms of martial arts or modern technology, there was no way to turn a dead thing into a living thing. He used to think that Xinyuan Feng devoured some murderous weapons and even the human emperor. But he ignored the fact that devouring itself was something that only living creatures could do. Moreover, he once owned falling stars and blue sky underworld. Although Li Tianlan could also feel the spirituality of these two murderous weapons, it was extremely weak and far from that of Xinyuan Feng. He didn't think that Xinyuan Feng could have its own will by devouring the murderous weapons. Until now. Until the scene in front of him appeared. He finally understood why the spirituality of the murderous weapon was so weak, and why Xinyuan Feng was a complete life form. The spirituality of the murderous weapon was weak. Because of their incompleteness. The 13 murderous weapons in the dark world came from the same piece of metal. That piece of metal was said to be a meteorite from outer space. Its whole body was full of vitality, and in historical records, it was known as the metal of life. The life metal that had been cut into 13 pieces had become a murderous weapon that could have vitality. This is already a miracle. But what if they were whole? What would they be like? Li Tianlan looked at the 5 small swords in front of him. It was as if they had met before, but it was also extremely strange. Li Tianlan raised his palm. A small silver sword surrounding the Xinyuan sword fell into Li Tianlan's palm. The delicate sword, only the size of a finger, rotated slightly, vaguely conveying a kind of excitement. Li Tianlan grew increasingly silent. Of course he recognized this sword. However, this sword should not have appeared here. This was the Silver Moon Sword. And the Silver Moon Sword was now on the stone of formidable person. This was the second Silver Moon. One after another, small swords appeared in Li Tianlan's hands. The second one was Jade. The second Void. The second one was Verdict. Li Tianlan trembled all over. Beside him, the long broken 13th floor slowly emerged. That was the twilight and grace that originally belonged to the 13th floor. 4 new small swords integrated into the sword formation in the constantly rotating sword energy. The Xinyuan sword was in front of Li Tianlan. The 13th floor, which originally had only 3 swords left, suddenly became 7 swords. What's going on? Li Tianlan asked. The dark body of the Xinyuan sword rolled in Li Tianlan's hands, conveying a sense of doubt. It seemed that it did not understand what was going on, and it did not know what to say. It could not speak, but it could play dumb. Li Tianlan did not continue to ask. He thought of the 4 murderous weapons swallowed by the Xinyuan sword. Falling stars, blue sky underworld, divine light of void, twilight of the gods. It swallowed 4 murderous weapons. It became 4 swords. They were exactly the same as the 13th floor. Li Tianlan could not believe it. But the truth was in front of him. When all the evidence was in front of him. When all the impossibilities were ruled out. The remaining possibility, no matter how absurd it was the truth. The Xinyuan sword was the human emperor of the Wang family of Beihai. And Xinyuan Feng, it was the combination of the 13 murderous weapons in the dark world. It was a complete life metal. Li Tianlan recalled the eternal sword that tore the sky above Mormons. He vaguely understood that the sword was indeed the Chosen One's sword, but it was not just the Chosen One's sword. It was also equivalent to the 13 murderous weapons in the Dark World firing at the same time. No one could resist that sword. Wang Tianzong could not. Even Dongqing Huangtu, who created the 13th floor, could not resist it. But the problem was that before Shenyuan Feng, the Black World. Among the 13 murderous weapons in the Dark World, the endless sky was broken, the legend of Qin became a falling star, and the other murderous weapons were kept in the hands of the major forces and countries. How did Shenyuan Feng come? Was there a second piece of life metal that had not been divided? The invincible sword, Li Tianlan laughed, a little self-deprecating. It seemed that a shortcut suddenly appeared in front of him. Now, as long as he took back the 8 swords inserted in the Wang family of Beihai, found Wang Yuetong to take back the broken heart, and brought back Aquamarine from Sai City, the Shenyuan sword's energy storage speed doubled after swallowing the 4 murderous weapons. As long as the Shenyuan sword finished storing energy, he would be qualified to directly threaten the Chosen One even if he did not cultivate. What if he collected all the murderous weapons in the Dark World? That was equivalent to 2 pieces of life metal to build a sword. How terrible would Shenyuan Feng be at that time? Would the 13th floor become the 26th floor at that time? His mind was a little confused and he thought of Qin Weibai again. The Shenyuan sword swallowing the 4 murderous weapons was the plan Qin Weibai gave. But, why did she hide from him? Li Tianlan's eyes were confused. The Shenyuan sword's blade shook slightly. In an instant, the other 6 swords around Li Tianlan flew out at the same time. The sword energy of the 6 swords filled the sky and turned into 6 Li Tianlans in front of him. The Shenyuan sword shook, conveying a kind of complacent emotion. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, waved his hand and said calmly, "Go back." Crack. In the crisp combination sound, the 7 swords returned to one at the same time and appeared beside Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan held the hilt of the sword. This feeling was a real blood connection. The night was getting darker. Li Tianlan held the sword and turned to the prison. Dawn broke on the horizon. The pale golden sun shone on the desert prison, and the whole desert was golden. Li Tianlan looked at the familiar building with a calm expression. The roar of the helicopter's rotors came from afar. There was no advance notice. Or Li Tianlan didn't receive the notice because he didn't return all night. The helicopter landed slowly in front of the prison gate. In the flying yellow sand, the cabin door opened. A slender figure walked out of the helicopter and saw Li Tianlan, who had walked to the prison gate at first glance. Li Tianlan froze in place and didn't know how to react for a moment. When he had been completely disappointed. The figure that haunted him stood there bathed in the desert morning sunshine. Dreamlike, perfect and flawless. Chapter 780. For some people, no matter where they stood, they were the best scenery. She was like the bright moon in the night sky, the rainbow under the clear sky, and the oasis in the desert. The moment he saw her, Li Tianlan's originally dry and almost lonely heart suddenly became moist. It was not a surprise but a kind of contented peace. His body slowly relaxed and his eyes softened. Without any hesitation, Qin Weibai trotted into Li Tianlan's arms. She held him tightly with her delicate arms, rubbed her head against Li Tianlan's chest and said with a soft smile, "Did you miss me?" "Every day." Li Tianlan's voice was hoarse and sounded as light as water. In more than a year, from the boss of the Samsara Palace living in the Dark World to the current patriarch of the Lin clan, her dressing style seemed to have changed a lot. The colorful dress on her did not look pompous, but had a kind of beauty that complemented each other. Not everyone, not even the so-called beauty, could control this kind of gaudy color. But in the desert morning wind, she, who was shining with colorful colors, had an indescribable gentleness and nobility. Li Tianlan's palms slid down her long hair, held her slender waist and slightly tightened. Their hearts beat in sync and they were at ease. "I miss you too. Every day." Qin Weibai took a deep breath and murmured. "Really?" Li Tianlan asked simply. "Are you angry with me?" Qin Weibai looked up at Li Tianlan and whispered, "There are a lot of things in the Lin clan. I didn't mean to hide from you." "How is the Lin clan?" Li Tianlan asked. He thought that he did not have the ability to break the Lin clan's principle of seclusion, but there was no doubt that Lin Fengting's attitude in Eastern Europe had shown a lot of things. At least in the process of the rise of Emperor Dong's palace, he could play an unimaginable role. Lin Fengting was now the #1 expert in the Dark World. Although such an ally seemed to stand aloof from the world, absolutely no one dared to despise him. Qin Weibai was silent for a moment, then said with a smile, "It's okay, but the Dark World has been a little chaotic recently. Although the Lin clan is secluded, it can't stay out of everything." Li Tianlan let go of Qin Weibai's exquisite and graceful body, took her hand and walked to the prison gate. He said casually, "Tell me in detail." Qin Weibai did not move. She stood in front of Li Tianlan and opened her arms. Under the sunlight, her bright eyes were a little blurred. She said coquettishly, "I want you to hug me." Li Tianlan moved slightly. He paused for a moment. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan's expression carefully. She had just asked him if he was angry. But the other party directly asked about the Lin clan. "Don't be angry, okay? I won't leave this time. I'll stay here to accompany you," Qin Weibai said softly. Li Tianlan sighed and bent down to carry Qin Weibai's body. The Xianyuan sword shrank again and jumped over Qin Weibai's head as if it was greeting her. Then it hid in the sword formation. After the things in Eastern Europe are over, the dark world is destined to be chaotic. Qin Weibai put her hands around Li Tianlan's neck, and her voice was a little lazy. Because there are too many invincible realm experts dead and injured. Jiang Qiansong, Cass Rotter, Charlemagne Huan Kong, and the seriously injured King Tong and Paul. The superpowers in the dark world are leaderless and chaos is inevitable. These superpowers represent the interests of many fields. If the invincible realm experts die and there are no invincible realm experts among them, others will naturally target the huge interests represented by these superpowers. The Heroes Club, the Fantasy World, the Shadow Throne, and even the Men in Black. All countries are secretly taking action, hoping to incorporate some of the superpowers. And these forces are also fighting for power. Some forces with invincible realm experts are stirring up trouble. For the time being they have no foundation. The invincible realm experts who were alone also want to fish in troubled waters. Even the headquarters of the Lin clan has received many requests for cooperation. They all hope that Mr. Lin can take action and even share half of what you get with the Lin clan. It's really a big deal, but I refused. Qin Weibai bit Li Tianlan's ear. The Lin clan that I control will only have you as an ally. A new invincible realm expert? Oh. Li Tianlan asked curiously. Mormon's sword strike was like the clearest dividing line. After that sword strike, the new era had been fully revealed. Most of the older generation of invincible realm experts began to withdraw from the stage. The new invincible realm experts slowly appeared. Zhang was the first. Wang Xiaoyao was the second. The third was Di Jiang. The invincible realm experts appeared one after another, and it seemed that they were assembling in new divine and holy lists. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and whispered, "I'm talking about the kind of invincible realm experts who have no background. No background, no national position. This kind of invincible realm expert was undoubtedly the most special and the most precious. He was a figure worthy of being roped in by various countries. Such people rarely appeared in the dark world. In recent decades there were only two. And they were both from Africa. One was Black Ghost. The other was Ramiro. But it turned out that Black Ghost was a pawn of the Jiang family of South America. And there seemed to be other forces behind Ramiro. An invincible realm expert with no background was more precious than a panda in the dark world. It's a killer. His code name is Ju. He's very ambitious. Now he's stirring up trouble in the Shadow Throne." Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes and curled up in Li Tianlan's arms like a cat. In addition, Jianghu of the Jiang family of South America has also broken through. In more than a year after Eastern Europe, there have been 5 invincible realm experts in the dark world. "It's lively enough," Li Tianlan whispered. He walked into the prison with Qin Weibai in his arms. Xiao Qing had prepared breakfast and stood outside Li Tianlan's dormitory. Seeing Qin Weibai curled up in Li Tianlan's arms, she was obviously stunned and lost in thought. Breakfast for her. Li Tianlan rubbed Qin Weibai's face with his chin, but he didn't introduce it to Xiao Qing. Okay. Xiao Qing handed the food box to Qin Weibai, and her bright eyes had become extremely dim. Li Tianlan calmly walked into his dormitory with Qin Weibai in his arms. Qin Weibai jumped out of Li Tianlan's arms and said with a chuckle, "There's something more lively." "What?" Li Tianlan asked casually. Qin Weibai opened the food box, took out the dishes inside one by one and said slowly, "There's no exact information about the Wang family of Beihai. But according to some information sorted out by the Lin clan, some dark forces seem to have signs of joining forces. Among them, the Vatican and the 2 martial arts sects of East Island are the most active. The Jiang family of South America seems to have taken action." She hesitated, narrowed her eyes and said softly, "Wang Xiaoyao of Snow Country seems to have taken action. They want to target the Wang family of Beihai?" Li Tianlan was stunned. "This is the best chance." Qin Weibai's tone was calm. "Different people have different purposes, but many people may want to completely destroy the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said softly, "They can't do it. Jianghu state must be ready at this time, right? What about you?" Qin Weibai looked up at Li Tianlan with a smile. "What are you going to do?" Chapter 781. Standing in the dormitory, Li Tianlan hesitated for a long time. The Wang family of Beihai. No one could deny the strength and glory of the Wang family of Beihai, whether it was the so-called new era or the past era. Li Tianlan had never denied this. Even in his heart, the Wang family of Beihai had always been his most powerful opponent. More than 20 years ago, Kunlun City was the main force that pushed the Li family down from the altar, but Li Tianlan had never taken them seriously. Kunlun City was not weak, but they had too many flaws. The time of rise was too short, the foundation was too poor, and the sense of belonging was too low. More than 20 years were not even enough to establish enough tacit understanding with Jianghu state. If Li Tianlan went to the peak, he would not have any pressure to deal with such a force. But the Wang family of Beihai was different. It was a behemoth that was really rooted in Jianghu state and the whole dark world. Its power had expanded to such an extent that unless there was an irresistible natural disaster, there was almost no possibility of destruction, at least not in a short time. Otherwise, they would not be qualified to play with Jianghu state. Even in this special situation, the Wang family of Beihai could not be destroyed by a few so-called super forces, because Beihai had Jianghu state behind it. When the loss of Beihai really touched the bottom line of Jianghu state would definitely take action. Jianghu state? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, "Which forces may attack the Wang family of Beihai?" "It's not sure yet." Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan's hand and asked him to sit at the table. She served him a bowl of porridge and said softly, "At present only the Lin clan has received some information, and we are just speculating. The Vatican, the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Training School, and Wuji Palace, to be exact, the royal family of East Island, their recent actions are very obvious. But the Wang family of Beihai has not noticed this." "The Wang family of Beihai has not noticed this?" Li Tianlan was thoughtful. Even the Wang family of Beihai had not noticed it, so how did the Lin clan receive the news? The information comes not only from the Lin clan, but also from military counselor. Although Samsara Palace is gone, the intelligence system we built is still working. For some special reasons, our infiltration of the Wang family of Beihai is the most successful. About half a month ago, Jifeng Sword Training School took the lead in sending a group of spies into Beihai province. A group of spies infiltrated the North Sea province. After that, Wuji Palace and the East Island royal family also responded, followed by the Vatican and the Jiang family of South America. These forces all have experts of the invincible realm. The reason why these spies could avoid the sight of the Wang family of Beihai was that Wang Xiaoyao of Snow Country secretly did something to help them hide their identities. Wang Xiaoyao, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, and a touch of mockery flashed in the depths of his eyes. "When I first saw him, I really didn't see that he was so ambitious." Qin Weibai wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end she smiled and said, "Who can tell?" Before Wang Xiaoyao went to Eastern Europe, everyone thought that Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao were very close. After all, they were brothers. Wang Tianzong was really good to his younger brother and never guarded against him. When the old patriarch of the Wang family died, Wang Xiaoyao was less than 10 years old. Wang Tianzong brought him up completely by himself. The elder brother was like a father. Wang Xiaoyao made a lot of trouble for Sword Emperor and offended many people for him. One of them was a top big shot in the Southeast group. What was more ironic was that the top big shot of the Southeast group that Wang Tianzong offended because of his younger brother was now a supporter of Wang Qinglei, or Wang Xiaoyao. No one could have thought that the two brothers would go to this step, and no one could have thought that a real ungrateful person would appear in the Wang family of Beihai in such a weak situation. He helped the spies of the hostile forces to lurk in his own family. This was completely to fight for power and profit, and it was clear that he was a traitor. Li Tianlan thought of his first meeting with Wang Xiaoyao in Huading Garden and shook his head slightly. "Are these the forces?" Li Tianlan asked. In the Vatican there was Moraid, an expert who was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm. Jianghu of the Jiang family of South America broke through the invincible realm. Jifeng Sword Training School had East Island's great Grandmaster Yagyu Kurumi. Antianhai Wuji, the palace master of Wuji Palace, was recognized as the #1 expert in East Island before the appearance of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. For invincible realm experts. For today's Wang family of Beihai, it was definitely a real big trouble. But could they destroy the Wang family of Beihai? Li Tianlan took it as a joke. What's the attitude of Jianghu state? Li Tianlan asked softly. There is no clear information now. Jianghu state and Beihai don't know. In Qin Weibai's tone, there was a deep meaning. Even if they know, I'm afraid they will pretend not to know at first. Sure enough, Li Tianlan's heart moved, and he suddenly realized that Qin Weibai's words meant something. Even if they know? He asked rhetorically. Qin Weibai sipped the porridge. Her movements were elegant and beautiful, and she didn't speak. Even if they knew, it was not an assumption. For this kind of thing Jianghu state might or might not know now. But now it showed that they didn't know. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and confirmed his thoughts again. Most likely, the trouble that the Wang family of Beihai was about to face this time had the shadow of Jianghu state. At least there was the shadow of Wang Qinglei. Wang Xiaoyao had taken action, so it was impossible for Wang Qinglei not to know the news. Even all this might be planned by Wang Qinglei. If this was the case, how could Jianghu state not know? But now they kept silent. Obviously, the parliament of Jianghu state now hoped that the Wang family of Beihai would be chaotic, the more chaotic, the better. Their goal was clear as day. Only when the Wang family of Beihai was in complete chaos under the impact of the superpowers, Jianghu state would take action and wipe out everything. When the power of Jianghu state officially entered Beihai to help stabilize the situation in Mount Dibing, it would be very difficult to let them out. It's not just these superpowers I mentioned. These are just the planners. I'm sure that when they really put it into action, there will be more forces invading the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai has occupied the position of the first power in the dark world for too long, and it has countless enemies. When there is a chance, someone will take the lead and all the forces, big and small, will emerge. It's not just the tradition of Jianghu state to beat the dog when it's down. Is the parliament so confident that Jianghu state can completely control the situation? Li Tianlan thought of all kinds of possibilities and shook his head subconsciously. Not to mention anything else, the 4 invincible realm experts were not easy to deal with. Where did the parliament get the confidence? Don't we have you? Qin Weibai laughed. When everything happens, the parliament will definitely send someone to find you. She looked at Li Tianlan. Or to ask you to go out and clean up the mess. That's why I asked you what to choose. Chapter 782. The ending of the Wang family of Beihai did not need to be considered. The various forces in the dark world might beat the Wang family of Beihai when it was in decline. But in fact, as long as Jianghu state intervened in this war, there would be no possibility of failure. The key was whether Li Tianlan himself was going to do something in this war. Qin Weibai was right. Once the war started, the parliament would definitely send important figures to the desert prison, hoping that Li Tianlan would go to Beihai to clean up the mess. Now no one doubted Li Tianlan's combat capability. From Eastern Europe to Beihai and then to Tianan, although his realm had not entered the invincible realm, he had a vague momentum of being the first person under the peak of the invincible realm. Moreover, he was the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace. Once he took action, Wei Kunlun, another invincible realm expert in Jianghu state, would definitely take action. With the support of Jianghu state, it would not be difficult to keep Beihai province. Most importantly, once Li Tianlan went to Beihai to clean up the mess, no matter what the final outcome was, such an action was equal to another cooperation between Li Tianlan, the academics, and the Prince Group, which could also shake the cooperative relationship between the Giant Group and the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan was sure that as long as he agreed to help, the two groups would take more aggressive actions against the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan sat in his seat and looked at the breakfast in front of him thoughtfully. The situation between the major groups was constantly changing. At every moment, there would be a new direction in front of him. If I agree to go to Beihai with the parliament, what are the chances that Jianghu state will compromise with the Giant Group? She picked up a tissue and wiped the corners of her mouth. She lowered her eyes and said softly, almost 100%. At this stage, the main target of the academics and the Prince Group is not the Giant Group, but the Wang family of Beihai. If you agree to take action, it is tantamount to forming an alliance with them. They will help the Giant Group to complete the shuffle as soon as possible, and then push you to Beihai province to put pressure on the Wang family of Beihai together. What do I get? Li Tianlan asked with burning eyes. A lot. Qin Weibai's voice was soft. A lot. First of all, the problems faced by the Giant Group would be easily solved. This was equivalent to the cooperation of the 3 groups. The shuffle of Minister Dongqing would be smoother, and he could even try to snipe Yi Dongxing. Secondly, if you go to Beihai, Jianghu State will restart the Snowdance Corps again and grant you the rank of marshal. It may even give you the identity of a member of parliament at one time. If all of this goes well, when the North is destroyed, after that you could become the new Legion commander of the North Sea Legion, or you could appoint a Vice Legion commander to represent you in the North Sea Legion. This is a truly prestigious position. Not only that, once their plan succeeds, Emperor Dong's palace may become one of the strongest forces in Beihai province in the future, and it will be qualified to keep pace with the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai paused and said softly, "Of course, it's the weakened Wang family of Beihai. And this process may take a long time." "Sounds good." Li Tianlan nodded. "Do you think I should say yes?" Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan quietly. Her eyes were full of meekness and she did not speak. Everything has its pros and cons. If I agree, what will I lose? Li Tianlan asked again. "I don't know." Qin Weibai shook her head and reached out to hold his hand. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "There are many possibilities," Qin Weibai said in a low voice. "If we cooperate with the parliament, some criticism is nothing. At least in the near future there won't be too much trouble. What you will lose, maybe, is only Yuetong." "Completely lose her?" Li Tianlan's body stiffened for a moment and he did not speak. "But if such a thing really happens," Qin Weibai wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "Just say what you want to say." Li Tianlan smiled, picked up Qin Weibai and put her on his lap. His fingers that were sliding on her face gently touched her red lips. Qin Weibai rolled her eyes at him and shook her head. "Tianlan, have you ever thought about it? If everything is as I said and Jianghu State regains the military and politics of Beihai province, how will the Wang family of Beihai compare to the current Wang family of Beihai? Will be much weaker. It can even be said that it will be several times or even dozens of times weaker. If you join the fight against the Wang family of Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace will control hundreds of thousands of troops of the Beihai Corps. At worst, you'll be the first commander. All the cities in Beihai province will have your voice. Emperor Dong's palace will also slowly develop in the next few years. At that time, while the Wang family of Beihai is constantly weakened, Emperor Dong's palace will continue to rise. The final result is that the Wang family of Beihai is gone, but Emperor Dong's palace will become the next Wang family of Beihai. I don't know what you think of this matter, but if I were the president of Jianghu State, after suppressing the Wang family of Beihai, after that, my next target must be Emperor Dong's palace. I will not hesitate to use all my power to completely control Emperor Dong's palace. It's only a few years. At that time, Emperor Dong's palace may be very strong, but it certainly won't reach the level of the Wang family of Beihai. And you, at that time, it's almost impossible for you to reach the peak. Li Tianlan's eyes were very calm. But at that time the minister is likely to retire. At that time, the giant group will be dominated by Emperor Dong's palace. Once Jianghu State suppresses Emperor Dong's palace, the academics and the prince group will form an alliance again. Not only the academics and the prince group. If the southeast group is abandoned now, at that time, the remaining Wang family of Beihai and the southeast group will also destroy Emperor Dong's palace at all costs. After a few years, as long as Wang Tianzong is not dead, he will come out to control the situation. With his strength, it's not difficult for him to kill you. At that time, Gu Xingyun's injury will also recover. The next session of the Special Warfare Group will also have a director. At that time, all the people of the academics, the Prince Group, the Southeast Group, and the Special Warfare Group will be suppressing Emperor Dong's palace, right? Li Tianlan asked. Qin Weibai nodded. I don't know what the final result will be. At best, you and Emperor Dong's palace will become a sharp sword in the hands of Jianghu State. At worst, the giant group will be destroyed. Emperor Dong's palace, the Dongqing clan, including you and me, everyone will not have a good end. Li Tianlan laughed and his eyes were a little cold. So I think someone from the academics and the Prince Group will come to you soon. It's even possible that Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing will show their sincerity in person. They can give you a lot. As long as they can give you everything. The Beihai Corps, even the Speaker of Beihai, your status as a counselor. As long as you want, they will give you everything without any hesitation. Qin Weibai's voice was low. Because they all know that no matter what they give you, they can take it back in a few years. No matter how arrogant Emperor Dong's palace is, it will not be more difficult to deal with than the current Wang family of Beihai. So you think I should help the Wang family of Beihai get through the current difficulties? Li Tianlan asked. This is just my suggestion. Qin Weibai whispered. In fact, leaving the Wang family of Beihai to help us bear most of the pressure is the best choice. She leaned in Li Tianlan's arms, raised her head, bit Li Tianlan's neck and said softly, "No matter what you decide, I will listen to you." Chapter 783. If it really happened, I will go and take a look. After breakfast, Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai, who was quietly clearing the table. He lit a cigarette and finally told her his decision. Such a decision didn't mean anything. He only said that he was going to take a look, that was all. Not all cooperation could be built on friendship. In fact, most of the time, the most stable cooperation was when both parties were enemies. Most of the time, whether or not two real forces wanted to cooperate was not based on the benefits of the cooperation, but on who the opponent was. Now that the Wang family of Beihai was already weak, it was difficult for them to face the parliament of Jianghu state, which was in full swing. And Emperor Dong's palace, which had just begun to grow, could not face such a colossus. Especially when Ning Qianxing, the mayor of Xinyuan City, was pushed down by Li Tianlan, it was impossible for the parliament to have no thoughts about Tiannan. Li Tianlan coming to the desert prison could also represent the opinion of the parliament for a period of time. Li Tianlan didn't think it was a wild ambition to try to control Tiannan. What he wanted was nothing more than a foundation that belonged to himself and the Li family. This was his bottom line, the bottom line that coincided with the Wang family of Beihai. All the cooperation between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace was based on this bottom line. Even children knew that if the lips were gone, the teeth would be interdependent. Emperor Dong's palace might not be qualified to participate in this game, but Li Tianlan, who represented the giant group, already had enough chips. Under such circumstances, supporting the Wang family of Beihai and letting the Wang family of Beihai bear the pressure was tantamount to escorting the development of Emperor Dong's palace. Today's Wang family of Beihai really needed such support. Could be said to be timely help. As for the alliance with the academics and the Prince Group, not to mention the bitter consequences in the future, this operation alone was nothing more than icing on the cake. By the time the Wang family of Beihai got through the current predicament, Emperor Dong's palace would probably have officially risen. At that time, the bottom line maintained by the two sides might be clearer, and the cooperation would be firmer. Li Tianlan understood the reason. He could understand right and wrong, but it did not mean that he was willing to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai for a long time. Wang Tianzong, Summer Solstice, Wang Xiaoyao, Wang Qinglei. Li Tianlan was silent. He didn't think it was possible for him to become friends with them. There's no chance of that. Therefore he only said that he would go and take a look. He felt aggrieved at the thought of this kind of cooperation. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and suddenly remembered the scene when the Wang family of Beihai supported him before he entered the desert prison. At that time, was the Wang family of Beihai in the same mood as he was now? You still can't let go of your past grievances? Qin Weibai cleaned up the table and smiled slightly. The fall of the palace master, the demise of the Li family, too many people, too many lives. Can we really let it go? Li Tianlan looked straight into her eyes and said, I understand the reason, but how can there only be reason in life? Qin Weibai's body stiffened for a moment and she sighed softly. She was not her. Therefore, from her personal standpoint, it was the most correct and stable way to join hands with the Wang family of Beihai. She couldn't understand the kind of hatred Li Tianlan talked about, and it was precisely because she couldn't understand that her behavior was the purest, unaffected by any grudges. Li Tianlan couldn't do it. She who was sleeping in Switzerland could not do it either. That was why she once said that she would let the Wang family of Beihai fall into hell forever. This was not viciousness but great hatred and fear. The era which she didn't know was the past or the future, became a boundless shadow in her heart. The unforgettable dream determined her position, thoughts and means. But a new era had come. It was a new era that she had never experienced, and it was also a new era that she had personally created. Therefore, in Mormons in the sword formation covered by the 13-story building, she raised the Xinyuan blade and activated the eternal sword light that had been buried for many years. She thought that she no longer had any positive value, so she flew to the sky. She killed the chosen one with her sword and fell into darkness forever, but she had no regrets. And Qin Weibai appeared beside Li Tianlan. That meant that everything had passed. The brand new her stood here, representing the most rational and clearest perspective. Qin Weibai grabbed Li Tianlan's palm and carefully worded her words. She would not ask Li Tianlan to do anything, but she would do her best to help Li Tianlan walk on the most correct path. Can you let go of Yuatong? She is the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai said softly. Li Tianlan stopped smoking for a moment. He put out the cigarette butt and said sullenly, she no longer belongs to the Wang family of Beihai. She just doesn't belong to me now. Qin Weibai said seriously, when the Wang family of Beihai is really facing a catastrophe, do you think she will go back? Li Tianlan was silent. Qin Weibai smiled and said, or we can find her first and ask her to go back. Li Tianlan frowned and asked, what do you mean? I mean nothing can't be let go. The only difference is what we can get. Qin Weibai said softly, the parliament of Zhongzhou state can see what I can see. The parliament can see it, but why can't the Wang family of Beihai see it? In the near future, the parliament will definitely send someone to contact you. As for the Wang family of Beihai, even if they can't receive news from the major forces now, they can see the current situation clearly, so they will definitely send someone to talk to you. It's unlikely that summer solstice will come. It's likely that Wang Xingxiao will come. He is now the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and can promise a lot of things. If you feel uncomfortable with this kind of cooperation, you can make some requests that make you feel comfortable. Wang Xingxiao won't refuse and he can't refuse. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai thoughtfully and said softly, requests that make them feel uncomfortable? Such a decision is very important. If you refuse the parliament, Emperor Dong's palace will definitely be affected to a certain extent. The Wang family of Beihai must make up for this. They must also give enough compensation for the past grievances. Besides, do you remember what happened in Reki City? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. What do you mean? Li Tianlan froze for a moment. Reki City. What Wang Tianzong told you. Qin Weibai said softly, you don't like the Wang family of Beihai because of Wang Tianzong. Or you don't like the Wang family of Beihai because of Wang Tianzong. Maybe you will also feel uncomfortable if Wang Xingxiao is the patriarch. Qin Weibai lowered her head and whispered, what if your woman becomes the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai? Will you still dislike the Wang family of Beihai with Yuetong as the patriarch? What if she becomes the patriarch and gives you a son in the future? Compared to the conditions offered by Zhongzhou state. Qin Weibai looked at the speechless Li Tianlan, held his hand and said softly, these are the things worth talking about. Chapter 784. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Weibai. It was not until then that he understood what Qin Weibai wanted, or what she wanted to help him get. Let Wang Yuetong become the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. These words could be said to be earth-shattering. But the last sentence, asking Wang Yuetong to give birth to a son for Li Tianlan, seemed to be somewhat meaningful. If this was a plan that lasted for decades, then what would the situation be like after decades? This was indeed the most worthy of discussion. But the problem was that he didn't want what Zhongzhou state was willing to give him, and the Wang family of Beihai might not necessarily do what he asked. The giant group and Emperor Dong's palace were the only allies that the Wang family of Beihai could choose. But on the other hand, the giant group could only count on the southeast group. Cooperation was mutual and both sides had needs. At least for now, both sides needed each other's support. If Li Tianlan made this request to Beihai, the possibility of the Wang family of Beihai agreeing was infinitely close to zero. They could accept paying some price in other aspects, even a huge price, but it was impossible for them to hand over the entire Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan thought about it carefully again and shook his head. It's unlikely. It might even be impossible. There's no harm in talking. Qin Weibai whispered. Li Tianlan smiled bitterly and said nothing. This problem was almost unsolvable. If his talent in martial arts was not so terrifying, if Wang Xingxiao could catch up with him, everything Qin Weibai envisioned would not be impossible. But on the other hand, if Wang Xingxiao could keep pace with Li Tianlan, the Wang family of Beihai would not need Wang Yuetong to be the patriarch. Li Tianlan had left the younger generation behind. Wang Yuetong became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and gave birth to a son for Li Tianlan. How old was Li Tianlan when their son became an adult? He was only 23 years old this year. 20 years later he would be at his peak, truly invincible in the world, and even have a ruling power that far surpassed Wang Tianzong's. At that time, if Li Tianlan wanted his and Wang Yuetong's son to be the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, no one could stop him. If the Wang family of Beihai could agree to this condition, it was almost equivalent to accepting the fact that the Wang family of Beihai would become a vassal of Emperor Dong's palace 20 years later, or even be annexed by it. Li Tianlan was indeed tempted by such a prospect. But the probability of this happening? No, there was no such probability at all. This completely smashed the bottom line of the Wang family of Beihai and stepped on their faces. The Wang family of Beihai cannot tolerate with this. Even if they were facing a life-and-death situation, their existence was still indispensable to Emperor Dong's palace. The matter of the next generation can be postponed, but they should be able to accept it if Yuetong takes over. Qin Weibai looked up at Li Tianlan and said seriously. The question is, where is Yuetong now? Li Tianlan murmured to himself, stroking her hair. To this day he could still clearly remember the scene of that little woman piercing his heart with her sword. Helplessness, despair and misery. That night in Mount Dibing was the last time he saw Wang Yuetong. Under the effect of the Immortality potion, her injuries quickly healed and she left the North Sea province. It had been more than a year. The Wang family of Beihai was looking for her. Emperor Dong's palace was looking for her. The Samsara palace was looking for her. Countless informants and intelligence agencies were looking for Wang Yuetong. But there was no sign of him. She seemed to have completely disappeared. She did not contact the Wang family of Beihai or Emperor Dong's palace, as if she had completely forgotten the world. The new city plan she proposed in Tianan was officially on track, but where was she now? Qin Weibai was silent for a long time and did not speak. I'll wait for them to come. Li Tianlan whispered, during this time the most important thing is to improve my own strength. Qin Weibai said obediently, have a rest. Li Tianlan touched her face and said with a smile, I'll keep watch. Qin Weibai nodded. From Switzerland to Jianghu state and then to the desert, she did feel a little tired after traveling non-stop. I'll sleep for a while and get up in the afternoon. She sat on Li Tianlan's bed and pulled the quilt away. The colorful dress was taken off under the quilt and placed to the side. Li Tianlan's eyes were a little hesitant. He looked at every corner of the dormitory and seemed to be thinking about where he should go to meditate. Qin Weibai held the quilt, bent her legs and sat up, revealing her snow-white shoulders. The faint fragrance lingered in the dormitory, natural and rich. She tidied her hair, looked at Li Tianlan with a smile and said softly, What are you looking for? Li Tianlan touched his nose awkwardly, I'm meditating. Oh. Qin Weibai looked at him and shook her head. She stretched out her snow-white hands and said with a chuckle, Come on. Xiao Qing, who was a little disappointed, forced herself to come to the outside of Li Tianlan's dormitory. When she was about to clean up the breakfast box, she saw her aunt standing outside the dormitory with a red face. She was hesitant, as if she wanted to leave but didn't want to leave. Her body trembled slightly, and her beautiful eyes were watery. She bit her lips and her face was full of bitterness. Xiao Qing whispered, What's wrong? The young woman with a plump and proud face was shocked. She looked at Xiao Qing in a panic and shook her head. No, nothing. Why are you here? I'm going to clean up His Highness's breakfast. Xiao Qing looked at her in confusion and took 2 steps toward the dormitory. Don't. The young woman grabbed Xiao Qing's arm, and her breathing was a little rushed. Don't go. Xiao Qing frowned, thinking of the woman she just saw who could no longer be described as simply beautiful. Her heart was sour and she stood there in a daze for a while. Cough, cough, cough. A slight cough suddenly came out as if she was choking on water. The sound was very light but it was very urgent. The young woman next to Xiao Qing suddenly shivered. Does she have a cold? Xiao Qing blinked. She should be changed to another dormitory. The young woman glanced at her and her eyes were a little blurred. Faintly, a subtle voice came out of the dormitory, charming and soft. You want to kill me? Don't get up. I only feel like my woman when I'm kneeling. Xiao Qing blinked blankly. She saw her father coming over from the corner of her eyes, and subconsciously raised her voice and called, Dad. The dormitory suddenly became quiet. A few seconds later, Li Tianlan suppressed some annoyance in his voice. What's the matter? Xiao Mahai was stunned and no one knew what he was thinking. He was a little embarrassed and said unnaturally, Your Highness, I just received a notice from the Parliament. The Parliament will send someone to visit His Majesty tomorrow. This was undoubtedly a very important news. So even if it was a little inappropriate, Xiao Mahai had to come. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and asked, Is it President Li Huaqing or Prime Minister Chen Fangqing? Xiao Mahai took a deep breath, suppressed the shock and absurd feeling in his heart and slowly said, Both? The President and the Prime Minister decided to visit His Highness in the desert tomorrow. He said the news but he couldn't believe it himself. The President and the Prime Minister came to visit Li Tianlan together. Chapter 785. Over the past 1 year, Wang Qinglei had always been in the limelight whenever he came to Yuzhou province. No one knew what this powerful figure, who was competing with Mount Dibing for the control of the Wang family of Beihai, was thinking. Everyone only looked at the facts. In fact, Every time Wang Qinglei came to Yuzhou to report to Li Huaqing, something always happened in Jianghu state. These matters could be big or small, but when all of them were linked together, it was enough to make anyone's scalp go numb. Wang Qinglei was already like this when he came to Yuzhou. As the president of Jianghu state, Li Huaqing inspected Wuyue, and his influence would only be greater. Li Huaqing's decision to inspect Wuyue was very sudden. It was as if he had gone down for a walk on a whim. Everyone who received the news felt a little uneasy, especially within the Southeast Group. Because of Li Huaqing's itinerary, the Southeast Group had already set off a storm. The game that had been going on for more than a year was still ongoing. The situation was not clear, but everyone knew that the election in a year's time was the real key. The situation that the Prince Group and the academics teamed up with Wang Qinglei could not be changed. But 1 year later, no matter what the result was, they were bound to slow down their offensive and seek a new balance. At that time, the Southeast Group might still be under a lot of pressure. But compared to the current situation where everyone was in a panic, the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai should have a breather. Before that, the Prince Group and the academics, which had been strong for a long time, were bound to make a big move against the Wang family of Beihai, temporarily drawing an end to their game over the past year. The goal of the two groups was obvious: the governor or speaker of the North Sea province. But to achieve this goal, it was unknown how many people would fall in the process. More than a year of planning all this was not enough time, but Wang Qinglei was too familiar with the Southeast Group. Now Li Huaqing suddenly wanted to inspect Wuyue at this point in time. In the eyes of most people, this was a signal that the two groups were going to launch a general attack on the Wang family of Beihai. Especially at this point, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing was inspecting Huading. Huading was so close to Wuyue that it made people's imagination run wild. Countless people were guessing and on guard. After a short period of preparation, Li Huaqing, who barely concealed his intentions, had already arrived at Jinling, the central city of Wuyue. He no longer needed to hide anything. Victory was in his grasp. As for the extent of his victory, that would depend on Wang Qinglei's preparations. But whatever. No matter what, with his re-election next year, the academics would be in an invincible position. At present, more than 6,000 elites have sneaked into Beihai, including 6 invincible realm experts, more than 80 thundershocking realm experts and thousands of fire-flaming realm elites. There are also a large number of intelligence personnel among them. Once the chaos starts, hundreds of important places in Beihai province will be attacked at the same time, including the new core of Beihai Core, some weapon research rooms, the headquarters of the 7 sword-holding families, and the provincial government of Beihai. Of course, most of the main forces are gathered in Mount Dibing. Such a force is enough to completely destroy the internal security forces and the Heaven Punishment Troop on Mount Dibing. Jinling Provincial Government, in a spacious office in Building 1, Wang Qinglei opened a map and pointed at a location. He looked at Li Huaqing in front of him and spoke in a serious tone as if he was really reporting important work. 6 invincible realm experts? Li Huaqing suddenly raised his eyebrows, seemingly a little surprised. Where did it come from? Invincible realm. At any time, they were the superiors standing at the peak of the dark world. When most of the invincible realm experts had withered, he couldn't figure out where Wang Qinglei found these 6 invincible realm experts. Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace have 2. Knights Templars have 2. In addition, His Majesty in Knights Templars has contacted the Jiang family of South America. Jianghu has entered the invincible realm. He is very interested in the Wang family of Beihai and even hired the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. Wang Qinglei said slowly. Tianhai Wuji had been close to the peak of the invincible realm more than 3 years ago. Yagyu Kurasumi's invincible realm had also been completely stabilized. The current head knight commander of Knights Templars, Moraid, was even stronger than Tianhai Wuji. The strength of the mysterious His Majesty was unknown, but he was definitely much stronger than the average invincible realm expert. Jiang Guochu of the Jiang family of South America seemed to have relatively poor qualifications, but among the several major forces, the Jiang family of South America could use the most resources. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, although Jiang Qinsong and Jiang Qinyin died in Eastern Europe, the Jiang family of South America still developed rapidly in the last year or so. Because in the chaos of Eastern Europe, Jiang Qinsong and Jiang Qinyin were not the only invincible realm experts who died. When most of the invincible realm experts were seriously injured or killed, the Jiang family of South America, which had lost the invincible realm experts but gained the invincible realm experts in a short period of time, was extremely stable. With Jiang Guochu's breakthrough, the Jiang family of South America dominated South America and gained a lot. This time it also contributed a lot. As one of the top superpowers in the Dark World, the foundation of the Jiang family of South America was undoubtedly much deeper than that of the two martial arts forces in East Island and Knights Templars. The last one was the invincible realm killer Jiu, who was now very flamboyant in the Dark World. Jiu's specific realm was unknown, but he was a killer, an invincible realm killer hiding in the dark. Even the peak of the invincible realm would not easily ignore him. The 6 invincible realm experts had their own characteristics and strong combat capability. Such a lineup, when fully prepared, could cause irreparable trouble to the Wang family of Beihai. Li Huaqing glanced at Wang Qinglei, frowned and suddenly whispered, "Can these people be controlled?" "Don't worry, President. There's no problem." Wang Qinglei's tone was calm. "What about the Jiang family of South America?" Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes. "Their headquarters are in South America, and they are interested in the Wang family of Beihai? What do they want?" Wang Qinglei paused slightly and said slowly, "Jianghu is cooperating with us this time. He is interested in the Wang family of Beihai mainly because of us or Jianghu state. He hopes that after we solve this matter, we can provide him with the necessary help." "For example?" Wang Qinglei said slowly. "For example, we can check and balance the Lin clan." Wang Qinglei said quietly, "What he wants is the Heroes Club. As long as the Jiang family of South America annexes the Heroes Club, they will dominate South America. In fact, he has already started to act, but he was warned by the Lin clan and had to stop." "You agreed?" Li Huaqing asked. "The Lin clan can't be used." Wang Qinglei shook his head. "Since they can't be used, there is no need to think too much. They just want to protect their own branch. At that time, we can bypass the branch of the Lin clan and help the Jiang family of South America. We can also get good returns." Li Huaqing lowered his head and took a sip of tea. After thinking for a while, he said slowly, "When will we act?" "About a month later." Wang Qinglei narrowed his eyes and suppressed the desire in his eyes. They still need some time to prepare to mobilize more people and resources. Li Huaqing nodded. "In Jianghu state, who is more suitable to clean up the mess in Beihai?" Wang Qinglei suddenly asked. "Gu Qianchuan?" "No." Li Huaqing shook his head and his eyes were deep. "I will go to the desert tomorrow with the Prime Minister." "Li Tianlan?" Wang Qinglei's pupils contracted. Li Huaqing smiled and said calmly, "I hope he won't let me down." Chapter 786. The wind on the stage of Formidable Person was getting cooler. It was still autumn in Jianghu state. The temperature in Beihai province, the northernmost part of Jianghu state, had dropped rapidly, and the northern part of Beihai was about to be heated. When Wang Xingxiao, who was wrapped in a coat, woke up from his meditation, it was already night. It was raining. The fine rain blew from Beihai with a cold wind, dark and bleak. Wang Xingxiao sneezed subconsciously. He stood up and looked at Beihai in the distance. The wind and rain roared from the sea level. The water of Beihai floated slowly. Wang Xingxiao closed his eyes and carefully felt the sea in the distance. The sky was silent and deep. The sea was vast and deep. The majestic sword energy between the sky and the sea seemed to have completely stabilized, as if it had completely integrated with the world, Beihai, and the sky. Wang Xingxiao laughed. In his perception, the sword energy in the distance was so clear and heavy. It stood on the sea level, but the sword intent had quietly spread to Mount Dibing. Every time Wang Xingxiao meditated, he could feel the sword energy slowly fluctuating with the sword intent all over the sky. That was the swordsmanship of the Wang family of Beihai. The supreme swordsmanship. Wang Xingxiao was more and more reluctant to leave the stage of Formidable Person. Only in this place, when he sensed that sword chi, could he truly calm down. The boring cultivation, the complicated matters, everything seemed to become smooth in this place. In the night, under the wind and rain, the sword energy that had spread to the stage of Formidable Person slowly began to retreat, gathering toward the deep sea, like the ebb and flow of the tide. Wang Xingxiao waited until the sword intent completely disappeared, then he took a deep breath and slowly turned around, saying, "Sixth sister." An enchanting figure quickly appeared on the stage of Formidable Person. The enchantress, who had resigned from all her posts in the Sky Academy, stood in front of Wang Xingxiao and said respectfully, "Patriarch." Wang Xingxiao looked down at his watch and asked, "Is he here?" "He's going up the mountain. Xian Ming has already gone to pick him up," the enchantress said softly. Wang Xingxiao nodded and said, "Go down and pick him up." The enchantress said yes, turned around and quickly walked down the stairs. Wang Shengxiao stood in front of the stone of formidable person, squinting at the silver moon on the top of the stone of formidable person, and lit a cigarette. The sword energy of the silver moon sword, which had already dimmed, shone again as the sword intent in the deep sea receded. The slender blade swayed gently in the night wind, as if it was looking down at Wang Shengxiao from above. Wang Shengxiao subconsciously touched his chest as if he could still feel the pain. Now he was a superior of the half-step invincible realm. In the past half a year he had made rapid progress. He had tried to pull out the sword from the stone of formidable person more than once, but he had never succeeded. The only time he had tried his best, he had been enveloped by the sword aura of the silver moon, and he had been severely injured. Wang Shengxiao closed his eyes and felt humiliated again. This humiliation was not limited to the stage of formidable person. It was also located in one of the 7 cities of the North Sea province, in the most important place of the 7 great clans. Every time he saw Silver Moon, Wang Shengxiao always felt that the entire Wang family of Beihai had been trampled on. The most ironic thing was that the person who had humiliated the Wang family of Beihai by dropping several divine weapons was the person whom the Wang family of Beihai had to rely on. Wang Shengxiao threw the cigarette butt on the ground and looked up at the silver moon emitting clear light in the night sky. He was expressionless like a statue. Light footsteps came down from the top. The enchantress walked up the stage of formidable person with 2 figures. Wang Shengxiao came back to his senses, turned around and showed a natural smile. "Uncle Lu, long time no see." He took the initiative to speak with a smile. Behind the enchantress was Xian Ming, who was in charge of all the intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai. Behind Xian Ming was Lu Shuanghua, the chief of Jiangnan Society, who used to be in charge of the intelligence in the south of Jianghu State and now controlled all the intelligence organizations of the Wang family of Beihai in Jianghu State. Compared with Xian Ming and the enchantress who had watched him grow up, Wang Xingxiao was more polite to Lu Shuanghua. "Patriarch." Lu Shuanghua nodded, his expression serious and dignified. "Uncle Lu, what can I do for you?" Wang Xingxiao asked. Lu Shuanghua took the initiative to meet him this time, and he didn't even tell Xian Ming the reason. Wang Xingxiao couldn't think of what could make him so cautious. "It's just some messy information, but I think I should tell you in advance." Lu Shuanghua didn't talk nonsense and went straight to the point. "Go ahead." Wang Xingxiao nodded. "There's something wrong with Wuxia and Tianan recently." Lu Shuanghua frowned. According to reliable information, Jianghu Kurasumi, the leader of Jifeng Sword Training School, appeared in Jinling the day before yesterday and secretly visited Speaker Wang Qinglei. In an instant, the pupils of Wang Xingxiao, Xian Ming, and the enchantress contracted at the same time. Jifeng Sword Training School. Wang Qinglei. "Are you sure?" Wang Xingxiao took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "I'm sure." Lu Shuanghua's voice was calm. And at the same time Jianghu Kurasumi went to Jinling, a visiting professor of Wuji Palace also went to Tiannan's sky capital. Wang Shengxiao gritted his teeth and breathed quickly a few times. Jiangnan Society now controlled all the intelligence forces of the Wang family of Beihai in Zhongzhou State. But as for Lu Shuanghua, the strongest coverage of his intelligence was undoubtedly several provinces in the south that were recognized as the territories of the Southeast Group. Jiangnan, Jianghuai, Wuxia, Minnan, as well as Jiangzhou and Huading. In the first 3 years of Tiannan, it was in the hands of the Wang family of Beihai. Dijiang led the Freedom Corps at that time, and Jiangnan Society also had a great layout in Tiannan. These could be said to be the direct forces of Lu Shuanghua. It was not surprising that he could receive the news that Jianghu Kurasumi went to Jinling and Wuji Palace went to Tiannan. The most important thing was why Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace went to Tiannan. In addition, the Northeast has been a bit chaotic recently. All kinds of signs show that the martial arts forces of East Island have established some contact with Chairman Wang Qinglei. I even suspect that many elites of other forces have sneaked into Beihai province. That's impossible. Xian Ming shook his head and interrupted Lu Shuanghua directly. If someone sneaked into Beihai, I would have gotten the news. Some of the spies arranged by Wang Qinglei are under control. Their movements are normal. Are you sure you have everything about Wang Qinglei in Beihai? Lu Shuanghua glanced at Xian Ming and said gently, "Well, even if you have everything under control, don't forget another person." Oh. Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. "Wang Xiaoyao." Lu Shuanghua lowered her eyelids and said blandly, "He is even more familiar with Mount Dibing and the Wang family of Beihai than Wang Qinglei. If someone sneaks into Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao is fully capable of hiding them. For so many years we have been defenseless against him. Who knows how many pawns he has?" In the current situation, it is unusual for the master of Jifeng's sword training school to visit Jinling. If I'm not wrong, this should be the precursor of their attack. Wang Xingxiao did not speak. What precursor? Enchantress asked subconsciously. At this stage we have stabilized our position. This is not what Jianghu state wants to see. Now what they want most is chaos in Beihai province. In this way, Jianghu state has enough reasons to intervene in the affairs of Beihai province again. Wang Qinglei will be the vanguard, and Jifeng's sword training school should be an external force that Jianghu state borrowed. They sent elites to sneak into Beihai, and Wang Xiaoyao hid and accumulated strength. Hey! Lu Shuanghua shook her head with a smile. This traitorous thing. Xian Ming's voice was cold and depressed. There was no doubt that he was talking about Wang Xiaoyao. This seemed to be the first time that an important figure of the Wang family of Beihai made an evaluation of Wang Xiaoyao. At least in front of Wang Xingxiao this was the first time. Wang Xingxiao's face changed and he waved his hand. Don't say that. His smile was a little bitter. Second uncle is not a bad person. He paused and whispered, it should be because he has been suppressed for too long. What the hell does he want? When His Majesty was here, did he do anything wrong to him? Now he is helping outsiders. He wants to destroy the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Qinglei wants the position of the parliament, and he has a motive. What about him? He destroys his own family. What can he get? Xian Ming waved his hand excitedly. His eyes were full of killing intent and disgust. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a while and took out his mobile phone. I don't know. He opened the communication software, sent a video and said hoarsely, but we can ask him directly. Chapter 787. Feiniao City, Shui Kingdom. As the sun rose, Wang Xiaoyao pushed open the door of his study. He stood in the courtyard and slowly moved his body, which was a little uncomfortable after sitting for a whole night. The cold morning breeze shrouded the luxurious manor. Wang Xiaoyao was stretching his chest expressionlessly. He walked up to a tall bell tower at the center of the manor. Two heavily armed elites of the Beihai Corps stood on the bell tower and saluted. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. He walked past them and looked down at the surrounding area. It was the largest manor in Feiniao City, and also the newest and most luxurious manor. There were a few villas scattered in the manor. A huge castle built in the medieval style at the center had yet to be completed, but most of the defense equipment was almost complete. The bell tower was the tallest building within 5 kilometers of the manor. It was also the perfect vantage point. The manor was built on the outskirts of Feiniao City. It had a wide view and a peaceful world. Standing on the bell tower, one could see the downtown area of Feiniao City, as well as the military base that was under construction near the manor. Wang Xiaoyao looked at everything with satisfaction, as if he was looking at his kingdom. Over a year, when everyone knew that Wang Xiaoyao was getting further away from Mount Dibing, the Beihai Corps here was still called the Beihai Corps, but it had expanded to almost 100,000 soldiers. Everything was carried out according to the Feiniao Agreement. Wang Xiaoyao was appointed as the new mayor of Feiniao City. He monopolized all areas of Feiniao City in the shortest time possible and expanded aggressively. He kept sucking the blood of Shui Kingdom, and had now become the true overlord of the dark world of Shui Kingdom. The manor in front of him and the unfinished castle were the headquarters that Wang Xiaoyao had prepared for himself. The military base outside the manor was under construction. The Beihai Corps consisted of almost 100,000 soldiers. Some of the most elite soldiers would be stationed here in the future, while the rest would spread across Shui Kingdom to absorb the local elites. Over a year had passed. It was neither a long time nor a short time, but Wang Xiaoyao had completely taken root here. Over a year ago, no one could have imagined that the playboy of Beihai, who seemed to have nothing better to do, would be able to do it. After the label that he had disguised for a long time was torn off, every step of his development in Shui Kingdom was so shrewd, decisive, ruthless, and conscientious. Wang Xiaoyao silently looked at everything in his sight, standing silently and motionless. Light footsteps sounded from behind him. An ordinary man who looked less than 40 years old climbed up the bell tower. Seeing Wang Xiaoyao's back, he smiled and said, "I knew you were here. What are you thinking about?" As he spoke, he handed the thermos cup in his hand to Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao took it and took a sip. The taste was average. Tea could almost be regarded as a luxury in Snow Country. He frowned but did not care about it. He just whispered, "I'm thinking about the next step." Next step? The middle-aged man had a playful look in his eyes. One North Sea Legion base is enough. I don't like it when people refer to this place as a North Sea Legion branch base. Wang Xiaoyao whispered. The middle-aged man's pupils suddenly shrank, and he said with a solemn expression, "Have you decided?" The army stationed in the Snow Empire was none other than the North Sea Legion. Or rather, they were soldiers from the North Sea Legion who had come to the Snow Empire. Wang Xiaoyao wanted to rename the army. It sounded like nothing, but everyone knew what it meant. It was almost equivalent to officially separating the army here from the Wang family of Beihai. It was not only in reality but also in name. Once the army here had a new name, it meant that Wang Xiaoyao had really parted ways with Mount Dibbing. It's not a good time. The middle-aged man shook his head. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, we've developed to this point and have reached a bottleneck. Renaming the army is just the beginning. After more than a year, the purge is almost done. The middle-aged man was silent. Wang Xiaoyao's purge was extremely cruel. Over the past year, almost all the members of the North Sea Legion who had come here had been purged. A small number of them were originally Wang Xiaoyao's cronies, while the others were all on the purge list. Wang Xiaoyao kept transferring people from the North Sea Legion blatantly. Those who could be named by him were basically his direct subordinates. Mount Dibbing naturally knew this. They didn't want to fall out with Wang Xiaoyao for the time being, so Mount Dibbing had never refused Wang Xiaoyao's transfer orders. As his direct subordinates came to Snow Empire one by one, the officers of the North Sea Legion of Snow Empire disappeared one by one. Those who obeyed him would prosper, and those who opposed him would perish. Could be said that Wang Xiaoyao had played the 8 words to the extreme. Batch after batch of officers who were loyal to the Wang family of Beihai and Mount Dibbing were all evaporated. All those who remained were Wang Xiaoyao's direct subordinates. Judging from his current control over the army, he could indeed give a new name to the North Sea Legion of Snow Empire. The middle-aged man nodded and said indifferently, "It's up to you. It's time for me to go." He took the cup from Wang Xiaoyao's hand and drank some water. "How about the new army be called the Calamity Army?" Wang Xiaoyao suddenly said with a smile. The middle-aged man suddenly spat out the tea in his mouth and sprayed it all over Wang Xiaoyao. "What are you talking about? The Calamity Army?" Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. "That's my code name." The middle-aged man was a little annoyed. Heavenly Calamity. A few years ago this was indeed a famous name in the Dark World. He was the top killer in the Dark World. However, before the final battle of Heaven Capital, Heavenly Calamity disappeared after failing to assassinate Li Tianlan. He endured for a few years and did not appear by Wang Xiaoyao's side until recently. He was a member of the Wang family of Beihai and was close friends with Wang Xiaoyao. They could be said to be best friends. "I used to be but not anymore." Wang Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "According to the normal track after the final battle of Heaven Capital, you should have worked for Li Tianlan for a few years. This was also the original settlement condition, but now," he sneered. "That was the settlement condition between the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan. What did it have to do with him?" "You are Tianqi." He turned to look at the top killer who had disappeared for a few years and calmly told him his new code name. Tianqi shrugged and said indifferently, "Whatever you want. What do you want me to do when I set off this time?" "You act alone. But before you act, contact the people of Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace and coordinate with them. You can contact Wang Qinglei for this." Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the Wang family of Beihai. He said softly, "Beihai province has been peaceful under his protection for too long. I should let Beihai see blood. None of the people on the list can live." Tianqi's eyes were a little complicated. After a moment of silence, he lowered his head and said slowly, "I see." Wang Xiaoyao turned around and patted his friend on the shoulder. He chuckled and said, "Have a pleasant journey." Tianqi nodded and turned to leave. Wang Xiaoyao hesitated for a moment and said in a grim tone, "If there is a chance, check up on the so-called His Majesty and see if you can find out his background. I'd like to see why he wants to talk about cooperation with me." Tianqi nodded and suddenly said, "After this chaos, Emperor Dong's palace is likely to intervene in the internal affairs of Beihai province. You should be prepared for this." "Emperor Dong's palace?" Wang Xiaoyao frowned and muttered to himself. Then he shook his head and said, "No." He said slowly, "Li Tianlan intervened. It's unlikely." "What?" Tianqi asked. "Because he's not stupid." Wang Xiaoyao's voice was calm. "Yes." Tianqi's voice was also calm. "He's not stupid." Wang Xiaoyao was stunned and thought about it. Tianqi said no more and turned to leave. His phone vibrated gently in his pocket. Wang Xiaoyao shook his head and took out his phone to have a look. His body stiffened slightly. Wang Xingxiao's communication request kept ringing unhurriedly. Wang Xiaoyao thought for a moment and waved his hand to signal the two elites of the Beihai Corps nearby to leave. After they walked down the bell tower, he slowly picked up the video call. It was night in Beihai province. Wang Xingxiao's face looked a little livid in the light of the phone. The two looked at each other through the screen and remained silent. On the phone was the sound of the waves of Beihai hitting the stage of Formidable Person, vague and familiar. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were a little dazed. He suddenly wanted to see the stage of Formidable Person again and the stone of Formidable Person facing the waves of Beihai. Second uncle. Wang Xingxiao greeted him with a smile and his tone was normal. Wang Xiaoyao nodded and looked at his nephew on the screen. After a while, he slowly said, "Have you eaten?" "Not yet. I'll make some supper later. Six Sisters' cooking has improved very fast recently." Wang Xingxiao's tone was natural. A smile also appeared in Wang Xiaoyao's eyes. He seemed to think of the enchantress's outrageous cooking skills. He shook his head and said softly, "Take care of yourself." Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xiaoyao and was silent for a long time. Then he said seriously, "Second uncle, do you care about me?" Wang Xiaoyao frowned and vaguely sensed something wrong. "When second uncle joined hands with East Island, you never cared about my situation." Wang Xingxiao smiled calmly. Wang Xiaoyao frowned. The warmth in his eyes quickly disappeared. He said coldly, "I don't know what you're talking about." Jifeng Sword Training School. Someone from Wuji Palace sneaked into Beihai province. "Second uncle, you must know about this, right? If they didn't have your help, how could it be so easy for them to enter Beihai?" Wang Xingxiao's calm tone seemed to hide a needle. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and looked more and more indifferent. This time he didn't deny it. He just said coldly, "Which part was exposed?" Wang Xingxiao paused. Beside him, the enchantress, Xian Ming, and Lu Shuanghua trembled at the same time. Just based on Wang Xiaoyao's words, they could already be convinced that someone had indeed sneaked into Beihai province, but it hadn't been exposed yet. Wang Xiaoyao was keenly aware of the change in Wang Xingxiao's expression. He chuckled softly and said in a low voice, "Interesting, interesting. The little guy who ran around me in the past knew how to trick me. Where did you get the news?" Jiangnan Society got the exact news that Yagyu Kurosumi appeared in Jinling and visited Speaker Wang Qinglei. Their whereabouts are too careless. Wang Xingxiao said calmly. Wang Xiaoyao, who had been calm all the time, suddenly said, and felt a little confused. His expression instantly became solemn. "Yagyu Kurosumi appeared in Jinling?" he asked. Wang Xingxiao looked at him and didn't speak. Wang Xiaoyao's free hand suddenly clenched, and he fell silent for a moment. Jiangnan Society found out that Yagyu Kurosumi appeared in Jinling. He didn't doubt that Jiangnan Society had this ability. But the problem was, he was very sure. During this time, Yagyu Kurosumi didn't go to Jinling at all. Then who did Jiangnan Society find? Or rather, where did this news come from? Chapter 788. The corner of Wang Xiaoyao's mouth moved. At this moment he seemed to want to say something. Finally, he took a deep breath, and the words on the tip of his mouth turned into a sneer. He was familiar with this feeling but also very strange. In the chaotic situation, there seemed to be a fog in front of him. There was a shadow in the fog, obscure, nothingness, but it was real. This feeling had been enveloping the Wang family of Beihai in recent years. With Wang Xiaoyao's previous status in Mount Dibing, it was not difficult to detect the vague shadow. But it was precisely because their existence was so ethereal that the Wang family of Beihai could not detect anything most of the time. Many times, a word, a small thing, seemed to have no impact at the time, but it often took a long time for them to realize what it meant. That might be the beginning of a plan or the key to a plan. And this time Wang Xiaoyao had this feeling again. The shadow seemed to have left Beihai and penetrated into Eastern Europe. In the shadow, a pair of eyes were calmly watching him. Wang Xiaoyao did not know whether it was a test or another conspiracy. Wang Xiaoyao could not even grasp all the key points in it. Yagyu Kurumi was one of the key points. But Wang Xiaoyao was really sure. Yagyu Kurumi did not go to Jianghu State during this time, nor did he go to Jinling to visit Wang Qinglei. In fact, Wang Qinglei's cooperation with Jifeng Sword Training School was entirely carried out through His Majesty. During this time, Yagyu Kurumi had been paying attention to Dalos and had never left. But Jiangnan Dao found Yagyu Kurumi in Jinling. Countless possibilities extended in an instant. Was there something wrong with His Majesty and Yagyu Kurumi? Or was there something wrong with Jiangnan Dao and Lu Shuanghua? Or could it be that another force that he had not noticed had intervened in the current situation? Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a long time, and his eyes became colder and colder. How many people are in Beihai? Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xiaoyao in the video and asked slowly. I don't know. After a long silence, Wang Xiaoyao finally said lightly, maybe you think too much. No matter when, there will be some foreign forces lurking in Beihai province, just to collect information. Wang Xingxiao said with some mockery, is collecting information worth Yagyu Kurumi, a great grandmaster of East Island, coming to Jinling? What does he want to do? I don't know. Wang Xiaoyao said lightly. There must be some people hidden by you, second uncle. You just admitted it. Now I want their locations. Wang Xingxiao tensed. He stared at the screen. The corners of Wang Xiaoyao's mouth gradually raised and he still said the same words, I don't know. Wang Xingxiao fell silent. The atmosphere seemed to be extremely stiff. Yao Ji and Xian Ming were a little nervous. For more than a year Wang Xiaoyao was in snow country and had almost never contacted Mount Dibbing. It might be good or bad if he didn't contact him. Now, when Wang Xingxiao contacted Wang Xiaoyao for the first time, the confrontation between the two sides was instantly revealed. It was almost tantamount to a falling out. If the news got out, it would undoubtedly make things worse for the Wang family of Beihai, which was already in a bad situation. Second uncle, Mount Dibbing has a history of hundreds of years and Beihai province has a history of hundreds of years. Our countless glory and brilliance are all accumulated by our desperate efforts. You are one of the most core members of the Wang family of Beihai. Do you really have the heart to see the Wang family of Beihai destroyed like this? Wang Xingxiao asked in a low voice. No one can destroy the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, it's just that there are some problems in the Wang family of Beihai now. Similar problems have appeared more than once in hundreds of years. Since there are problems, we must correct them. After correction, Beihai will become better. He looked straight into Wang Xingxiao's eyes and said slowly, I will correct the problems of the Wang family of Beihai. Only in my hands the Wang family of Beihai will become stronger and stronger. In your hands? Wang Xingxiao sneered, in your hands or in the hands of the parliament of Jianghu state? Beihai? Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and said lightly, it has always been a part of Jianghu state. No one can deny that. Wang Xingxiao said flatly, for hundreds of years as a part of Jianghu state, Beihai and the Wang family are worthy of Jianghu state. But the foundation of Mount Dibbing cannot be destroyed. We need a certain degree of freedom. Freedom requires strength. Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, in our current situation the freedom we want is too high. Beihai now has heavenly sons, invincible realm experts, me and hundreds of thousands of Beihai core. It only takes time. When my father recovers, the Wang family of Beihai can reach the peak of hundreds of years. I don't think our strength is weak now. Wang Xingxiao said coldly. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and shook his head saying, if we don't agree, then, do you think there is a so-called problem now? Do you think you can lead the so-called Wang family of Beihai to the peak again if you destroy the current Mount Dibbing, the current Beihai, and your biological elder brother? Do you insist on your opinion? Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xiaoyao and said, the Wang family of Beihai is very big. Second uncle, there are very few family members who are really close to you. You have destroyed all the family members. What about the Wang family of Beihai? You don't understand. Wang Xiaoyao said quietly. Wang Xingxiao smiled. His eyes were a little cold. I really don't understand and I don't need to understand. But you should know that Beihai still has me. No matter what you want to do, I won't agree. He slowly straightened his body and said in a tougher tone, I am the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Everything in Beihai province is mine and belongs to me. Wang Xiaoyao looked at him playfully and did not speak. Second uncle, what I give you is yours. I won't give it to you. Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xiaoyao deeply and said, you can't take it. Wang Xiaoyao suddenly laughed. I want to try. The corner of Wang Xingxiao's mouth moved. He looked at the wild Wang Xiaoyao in the video and was silent for a long time. In this state Wang Xiaoyao was so flamboyant but so lonely. Second uncle, Wang Xingxiao whispered, come back. Don't you miss home for more than a year? The wild laughter stopped abruptly. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Xingxiao silently. His eyes fluctuated violently for a moment, and then he laughed softly. I can't go back. He shook his head with a chuckle and said in a leisurely tone, since I'm here, I can't go back. No matter what, I still hope to see the second uncle from before, free and unfettered, carefree. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were complicated. When I was born, my name was given to me by your grandfather. Wang Xiaoyao whispered. Wang Xiaoyao, on the other hand, isn't it King Xiaoyao? He wanted me to be free for the rest of my life. What is the so-called freedom? It's not fighting. Only when I don't fight can I be free of worries. It's just that he was wrong, Wang Xiaoyao chuckled. How can I not worry when I'm in the Wang family of Beihai? How can I really be free? The corner of Wang Xingxiao's mouth moved. Say no more. Wang Xiaoyao calmed down and looked at Wang Xingxiao. I won't change any of my decisions. I'll take what I want. From today on, there are only two outcomes for me in Beihai. Either Beihai is mine, or I die. He hung up the video call directly. The sky above Fanio City was completely lit up. In the whistling footsteps, a loud military song sounded near the manor. That was the military song of the Beihai Corps. It was majestic and heroic, just like the sky and the sea on the land of more than 100,000 square kilometers. Wang Xiaoyao looked at the nearby base, his eyes in a trance, and he muttered to himself. Death is inevitable in a man's life. Chapter 789. Li Huaqing and Qin Fangqing's itinerary was very clear. There was no surprise attack and the process was very clear. The day before their departure, the desert prison had received notices from the President's office and the Prime Minister's office respectively. They would arrive at the desert prison at about 11 o'clock in the morning. No matter what the intentions of the two giants were, it was an unprecedented event for the desert prison. Xiao Mahai had begun to arrange as soon as he received the news. The conditions were limited, so the welcome ceremony would not be too grand. However, the huge prison had been cleaned several times inside and outside overnight, and it looked extremely clean and tidy. When Li Tianlan, who had been busy all night, walked out of the dormitory, the whole prison could be described as spotless. Li Tianlan glanced at it casually, twitched the corner of his mouth and did not say much. Your Highness. Xiao Mahai stood dozens of meters away from Li Tianlan's dormitory. When he saw Li Tianlan coming out, he trotted directly to him, wanting to say something but hesitating. Clean up here too. Li Tianlan nodded. Wait for her to finish. Xiao Mahai smiled and said, What would you like to eat in the morning, Your Highness? Whatever. Li Tianlan handed Xiao Mahai a cigarette. Have you confirmed the itinerary? Yes, the Prime Minister and the President will arrive at the prison at about 11 o'clock. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed and he nodded. Got it. The President and the Prime Minister came to the most secret prison in Jianghu State in person. Their sincerity could not be described too much. For Li Tianlan this was also a great honor. At the same time, it could be seen how much the two giants expected for this conversation. The greater their expectations, the greater their disappointment after the conversation. For Li Tianlan, this conversation was almost equivalent to a war. Diplomacy before force. The President and the Prime Minister had given him enough face. If Li Tianlan did not accept it, then he would naturally face the anger and suppression from the two giants. He smoked silently for a long time. Xiao Mahai left silently, ready to find someone to clean up the nearby area. Qin Weibai, whose face was ruddy and looked cold and coquettish, pushed open the door of the dormitory and walked over, grabbing Li Tianlan's hair. Have you packed up? Li Tianlan smiled. Qin Weibai's face turned red, and her watery eyes glared at him fiercely. She arrived at the prison yesterday morning. After breakfast, Qin Weibai was tormented by Li Tianlan until noon. Her physical strength was almost exhausted. She slept soundly in the afternoon, and then she had a sleepless night. The entire night. The rest of the prison staff were busy cleaning up. Li Tianlan was also busy. It was not until dawn that Qin Weibai fell asleep for a while. Then she got up to tidy up the sheets and ventilate the room. Now standing in front of Li Tianlan, her legs were limp. I guess from today on, Emperor Dong's palace will have a hard time. Li Tianlan threw the cigarette butt on the ground and said softly. Yes. Qin Weibai said with a slight nasal sound. Her eyes were a little vacant and languid. What do you think? Li Tianlan asked. He would never agree to Li Huaqing and Qin Fangqing's request. They might not be able to do anything to him in the desert prison, but they could suppress Emperor Dong's palace at any time. Now Xianyuan City was developing very smoothly, which was based on the massive material aid and economic support of the parliament. Once this aid was interrupted, Xianyuan City would definitely be in trouble in the short term. Li Tianlan really wanted to hear Qin Weibai's thoughts. Qin Weibai took a step forward and held Li Tianlan's hand. She lowered her head, looking a little weak and wronged. Tonight. I want to sleep tonight. She didn't have any thoughts. She really just wanted to sleep. Purely sleep. No. Li Tianlan said in a soft voice. Qin Weibai raised Li Tianlan's hand and kissed it gently. She pouted and felt even more wronged. I know you are still angry with me. I was wrong, okay? It was indeed a rare sight to see a goddess acting like a spoiled child. Li Tianlan smiled and pinched Qin Weibai's face. Let's not talk about this first. If I'm in a good mood tonight, I'll let you go. What do you want to say after Emperor Dong's palace? Difficulties will only last for a while. Qin Weibai's face leaned on Li Tianlan's palm and rubbed it gently. In this regard, we can solve it after the Wang family of Beihai talks with you. If Jianghu state doesn't give it, we can ask the Wang family of Beihai for it. I've arranged it before I came here. The Lin clan can donate some materials to help you get through it. The most troublesome thing is those wealthy families and funds that are investing in Tiannan. The attitude of Jianghu state may affect their decisions. However, some wealthy families that have invested a lot will instead become our help. At that time, we can only see the specific situation and then think of a targeted way. Li Tianlan touched Qin Weibai's face unconsciously and said thoughtfully, the Wang family of Beihai is really patient. Once the news gets out, Wang Xingxiao should be here in a week at most. Qin Weibai murmured, Tianlan, I want to sleep a little longer. In Italos, on the huge and magnificent martial arts practice field. His Majesty, who was shrouded in starlight clouds and mist, moved his body and slowly walked down the steps of the martial arts practice field. He looked at His Majesty's back with a complicated look in his eyes. A tall and burly young man grasped the railings around the martial arts practice field tightly and looked at His Majesty's back with a complicated look in his eyes. You can think about it. As my disciple, your realm is unstable, and the chance of you reaching the peak of the invincible realm is not big. But if you have me, at least I can give you 20% more chances. His Majesty said without turning his head. I really want to know. The young man suddenly said, if you don't count the one in the Lin clan, who is the top expert in the dark world now, you or Li Tianlan. Very few invincible realm experts in the dark world were purged in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Several of the strongest invincible realm experts could not see any hope of recovery for the time being because of their serious injuries. In this state, Li Tianlan, who held the Shenyuan blade in his hand, had a kind of aura that could sweep the world. After he fought all the way through Beihai province, the dark world almost thought that he was the top expert except for Lin Fengting. This title was undoubtedly very controversial. Some people thought so, but others denied it. But even if they denied it, they couldn't recommend anyone else who could compete with Li Tianlan. Wei Kunlun was the deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan's deputy. Beihai Dijiang? He was also defeated by Li Tianlan. Wang Xiaoyao didn't make a move at all, but people didn't think he was Li Tianlan's opponent. There were still two great grandmasters in East Island. Especially the one from Wuji Palace, who had been ranked in the top 10 of the divine list. But compared with Li Tianlan, especially Li Tianlan who had the Shenyuan sword, people still didn't have much confidence. Jianghu didn't think he was Li Tianlan's opponent either. Until he met His Majesty who looked unfathomable. This friendly competition was proposed by Jianghu. The place of the competition was also very secret, and Moraid was the only audience. After breaking through the invincible realm, all the pride that Jianghu had accumulated was completely wiped out in this competition. 5 minutes. From the beginning to the end, His Majesty completely suppressed Jianghu. Or it could be said that he completely crushed him. He had no power to fight back. Jianghu lost completely. If this was a battle of life and death, Jianghu even suspected that he couldn't survive at all. The process of the competition was simple and there was nothing exciting about it. It was a beating from start to finish. In Moraid's view, this was exactly like a father beating his son. At the beginning of the competition, Jianghu immediately condensed the domain that the Jiang family of South America was proud of, which was known as the first defensive domain in the Dark World. Then His Majesty took a step and appeared in front of Jianghu. The battle was completely over from that moment on. Jianghu's domain was completely broken the moment His Majesty got close. Then it was time for Jianghu to be beaten. Just one step had directly determined the outcome of this spar. Jianghu was convinced of his defeat, but he still couldn't help but be curious. Who was stronger, Li Tianlan or the one in front of him? His Majesty's figure paused slightly. If it was Li Tianlan a year ago, he wouldn't be much stronger than you. Even with the Shenyuan sword, he wouldn't be my opponent. His Majesty slowly opened his mouth and his voice was soft. What about now? Jianghu asked subconsciously. How do I know? I haven't seen him in this year. His Majesty laughed and said, I think he should have made great progress. He was silent for a moment and continued, I don't know how far he will go. But if there is no accident, I am not his opponent under normal circumstances. But under special circumstances he won't be my opponent. What is a normal situation? Jianghu's mouth twitched. What is a special situation? It's a normal situation to compete with you. His Majesty glanced at him and said with a faint smile, as for the special situation, it depends on whether I'm willing to pay a moderate price. So you can win, right? Jianghu asked. It doesn't matter. His Majesty shook his head. It's not the best choice to have a conflict with Li Tianlan now. Our most important goal now is the Wang family of Beihai. Jianghu narrowed his eyes. After the Wang family of Beihai, I hope you can fulfill your promise to me. Of course. His Majesty nodded. Take a break. The two from East Island are coming soon. Let's discuss it then. He nodded and left the martial arts practice field with Moraid. Your Majesty is really powerful. Moraid followed His Majesty like a lackey, flattering him like a tide. His Majesty smiled and didn't say much. Your Majesty, what do you think Wang Qinglei's choice is? Moraid asked curiously. His Majesty gave him a choice between Beihai and Kunlun City. Wang Qinglei agreed to cooperate, but he didn't tell His Majesty what he promised. His Majesty accepted it. It can only be Kunlun City. His Majesty said blandly, he can't give up Beihai and he doesn't have the courage. Kunlun City? Moraid hesitated. So after the thing in Beihai, our goal is Kunlun City. His Majesty paused and suddenly whispered, it feels so good. What feeling? Moraid was a little confused. The feeling of standing in the center of the stage. His Majesty laughed. He patted Moraid on the shoulder. The first 10 years were the stage for Wang Tianzong and the Master of Samsara Palace. The new era is the stage for me and Li Tianlan. In the end it will only be the stage for me. It's time for some irrelevant people to leave. Chapter 790. The helicopter roared past in the air. Li Huaqing lowered his head and quietly looked at the landscape that was gradually becoming desolate below. He suddenly asked, what do you think of the result this time? Opposite him, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing of Jianghu State was sitting quietly and reading today's new newspaper. When he heard Li Huaqing's question, he was stunned and shook his head subconsciously. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, it's hard to say. You don't think so? Li Huaqing said slowly. Their private plane set off from Yuzhou today. After landing in Beijiang, they went to the military area and then took a helicopter to the desert prison. Along the way, this was the first time they discussed the upcoming conversation. There's nothing to think about. He may agree or refuse. It just depends on what he wants. To be honest, his rise is so fast that it's almost a straight line. Even if he's trapped in the desert now, it doesn't affect him much. We know too little about him, so it's hard to judge his intentions. Chen Fangqing shook his head and suddenly said, if it were Li Honghe, no, even if Li Honghe were still alive, the success rate of our negotiation would increase a lot. Unfortunately, Senior Li died too early. Li Huaqing was silent. Li Honghe's life was absolutely open and above board. He might have owed everyone, but he had no qualms about Jianghu State and guarding Jianghu State. He was the best god of war in Jianghu State in the past 100 years. Even during the decline of the Li family for more than 20 years, he still guarded the border of Jianghu State with some old people of the Li family. He devoted the first half of his life to Jianghu State, and his loyalty to the country was beyond doubt. If he were still alive, they wouldn't even need to make such a big fuss about this negotiation. They just needed to get through Li Honghe's work, and the matter would be half done. But now Li Honghe had fallen, and a broken but wildly rising Li family had reappeared in Li Tianlan's hands. In general, Li Tianlan's position didn't need to be doubted. From this point of view, even the position of the Wang family of Beihai didn't need to be doubted. They were definitely on the side of Jianghu State. But whether it was Li Huaqing or Chen Fangqing, this was not what they wanted. Or more than this. Therefore, no one could tell what Li Tianlan would choose in this negotiation. Wang Qinglei's suggestion yesterday was very interesting. Chen Fangqing suddenly said thoughtfully, President, how much of his proposal do you think is for balance and how much is for Beihai? Most of it should be for the sake of balance. How can he care about the North Sea now? And as long as he agrees to cooperate with us, our plan will succeed. He knew that he couldn't escape. As for his proposal, Li Huaqing paused. Chen Fangqing didn't say anything. He just quietly looked at Li Huaqing. His eyes were very calm and there was no extra expression on his face. Li Huaqing subconsciously shifted his gaze and said faintly, "That was my original intention. We have been involved in politics and balance all our lives. With Li Qianlan's current future and status, how can it be so easy to persuade him? If he agrees to help us, he will lose something, so we must let him gain something. This little bit of benefit won't be enough to satisfy his appetite." He spoke very slowly and towards the end, his voice became softer and softer, as if he was trying to convince Chen Fangqing. After a brief silence, Chen Fangqing softly said, "President, I can understand your approach, but I'm afraid that some comrades might not agree to it." Li Huaqing smiled. The other party's words were very euphemistic. Other comrades not only disagreed with it, but if he made his ideas public now, Chen Fangqing might support him in this matter to a limited extent, but most people in the Prince group would oppose it with all their strength. At that time he would also suffer great pressure. Li Huaqing closed his eyes and sighed, feeling a little tired. "What about you?" he asked slowly. "I personally agree with your behavior and principle." Chen Fangqing nodded. In this kind of thing he did not hesitate at all. As the god of war of Jianghu state in more than 20 years, Gu Xingyun did not show the bearing and demeanor that Jianghu state should have. He is not qualified. But not too bad. Li Huaqing said, "It's still because Beihai is too sharp. Let's change it." Chen Fangqing remained calm. Li Huaqing sat there and thought for a long time before he whispered, "Prime Minister, do you think we did wrong? How can there be right or wrong in this kind of thing?" Chen Fangqing laughed. "But their existence is too dangerous, or rather, their freedom is too dangerous. Hey, for hundreds of years, Beihai province has brought us too many benefits, but the Wang family of Beihai is like a bomb that can explode at any time. No force in the world has nuclear weapons, but the Wang family of Beihai does. Such a force is enough to make any president restless. It's okay when the situation is calm, but what if it happens? It's okay when the situation is calm, but what if? No one is willing to bear this kind of danger. It's just that the Wang family of Beihai is too strong. It has been glorious for hundreds of years and has always stood at the peak. For such a long time there have been several large-scale chaos in Beihai, but they have the Li family around them. They have always had the Li family. This may be the most successful alliance in history. Every time the Wang family of Beihai faces huge internal troubles, the Li family will stand up to protect the Wang family of Beihai and help them get through the crisis, so that many people in power can't find a chance. And now," Li Huaqing shook his head. "No, not just now. You and I both know that some plans actually started more than 20 years ago. When the Li family just declined, Jianghu state secretly set up something against the Wang family of Beihai. But at that time the Wang family of Beihai was still strong, but now the opportunity has come. This time the Wang family of Beihai still has internal troubles, but no one helps them to resist external troubles. They don't have the Li family around them. Under such circumstances, I really don't want Li Tianlan and the Li family to stand by their side again. Only by controlling the Wang family of Beihai can Jianghu state really have no hidden worries and be really safe. Nuclear weapons are the bottom line of Beihai, but even if we take away their so-called bottom line, they are still the world's leading superpower. Why can't they figure it out?" Chen Fangqing was silent for a long time, then chuckled. "Because of the sense of security." "Sense of security?" Li Huaqing raised his eyebrows. "They have a sense of security when the nuclear weapons are in their hands, but we don't, and vice versa." Chen Fangqing said, "This kind of contradiction can't be reconciled." Li Huaqing lit a cigarette and smoked in silence. "This is not a problem we should consider. Beihai is right and so are we. It's just that our positions are different." Chen Fangqing said, "You should think about yourself." He looked at Li Huaqing with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. "Once you want Li Tianlan to gain something, you can imagine the pressure you will bear. I will retire next year. Even if you can be re-elected, my successor may not." He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally he said softly, "You know what I mean. If that's the case, your re-election can't even protect the academics. Your reputation and even your end may not be too good." Li Huaqing nodded, flicked the ash off his cigarette and laughed. "So what?" He shook his head. "In this position I am the president of Jianghu state. I have to do something for Jianghu state." He paused and continued, "For Jianghu state." Chapter 791. The plane sped through the air. The documents clattered in his hands. Wang Xingxiao lowered his head and quickly flipped through the documents. His expressionless face tightened, and his eyes were dignified and serious. The documents in his hands were very thick, page by page. A large number of economic data and public opinion surveys were listed, as well as analysis of the future. From time to time, some weird-looking graph appeared in the dense text. Wang Xingxiao looked at it quietly without saying a word. Compared to Li Tianlan, or even compared to any other young man of his generation, Wang Xingxiao had a brilliance that others could not hide. Li Tianlan had a talent for martial arts that Wang Xingxiao could not reach, but Wang Xingxiao also had a view of the overall situation that Li Tianlan could not match at this stage. The environment he grew up in had already determined what kind of position he would stand in the future and what kind of vision he would have in the future. Whether in the judgment of the overall situation or the handling of daily affairs, his actions were natural and familiar. During the 1 year in charge of the Wang family of Beihai, all of Wang Xingxiao's actions might not be said to be brilliant and bold, but they were absolutely stable. His grasp of the family's affairs, his attitude toward the enemy, his measures in Beihai, his understanding of Jianghu state, and his future plans showed that he was a very qualified patriarch. The rotors hummed as they whistled through the air. In the slightly bumpy cabin, Wang Xingxiao quickly flipped through the documents, and his eyes suddenly froze. The parliament decided to open number 004 Armament Depot to Shenyuan City? He raised his head and glanced at Firmament sitting opposite him. Wang Tianzong was seriously injured and missing. Dijiang was expelled from Beihai. After Wang Tianzong became the patriarch, he had been following Wang Xingxiao like his bodyguard and half of his teacher. Firmament, who had never had a clear position in the Wang family of Beihai, had now become the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps. His status was above several deputy commanders and second only to Wang Xingxiao, who was also the commander of the corps. He was in charge of the daily affairs of the Beihai Corps. The document Wang Xingxiao was asking about was also handed to him by him. The transmission channel of the document was also on the right track. The Army Ministry drafted the document, the President signed it, and the Cabinet remained silent. The document was again passed to the Army Ministry, and Dongqing Wudi signed it himself. Now, the only procedure before the document officially came into effect was the parliamentary seal. The document was drafted yesterday, and it was delivered to the various armies in the middle of the night. Such speed could be said to be truly swift and decisive. To be precise, Li Huaqing wants to open the No. 004 Armory to Shenyuan City. At present, this matter is controversial, so it hasn't been discussed in the parliament yet. However, there should be many different opinions within the parliament. Firmament said slowly. Wang Xingxiao lowered his head and looked at the document. He frowned. The so-called number 004 armament was not a large-scale arms aid, but a set of extremely advanced semi-automatic weapons system with an extremely advanced detection system, flexible scanning range, a variety of weapon terminals, strong controllability, great destructive power, and extremely high precision. It could perfectly adapt to the ground war and also take into account part of the anti-air capability. This system could be said to be one of the signboards of the military of Jianghu state in recent years. The lack of a clear code number did not mean that it was not valued, but it was more secretive. If such a system was fully equipped, putting aside the high cost of construction and maintenance, it was self-evident that it would contribute to the development and rise of Shenyuan City. With this system, Emperor Dong's palace and Shenyuan City were almost invincible. Li Huaqing proposed to open the number 004 armament to Shenyuan City, which was full of courage. If this deal could really succeed, then the relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the academics would undoubtedly be greatly eased. On the other hand, this weapon system could also greatly influence Li Tianlan's choice and position. What's the possibility of the parliament passing it? Wang Xingxiao asked. It has Dongqing Wudi's signature. Firmament's tone was very tactful. But Wang Xingxiao understood the meaning of this sentence. Dongqing Wudi wanted to equip Shenyuan City with the 004 system. Not to mention whether this would affect the cooperation between the Giant Group and the Southeast Group. When it came to the specific system, everyone wanted it. When Wang Tianzong was here, the Beihai Corps also applied for it twice, but they were both rejected. Now the system was given to Shenyuan City, which showed the obvious intention of roping them in. If the parliament passed it, the Giant Group and the Southeast Group might still cooperate, but Dongqing Wudi was bound to be more conservative in the following game. After all, he was soft-hearted. What about the Southeast Group? Opposed when their ally made it clear that they wanted it? That was what the academics wanted to see most, wasn't it? What do you think? Wang Xingxiao suddenly said. It depends on how determined you are. Firmament smiled. Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. It's not that the core can't provide a weapon system comparable to 004. Firmament whispered, in terms of weapon terminals, our combination is even more reasonable. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a moment. Of course, he knew which system of the Beihai core firmament was talking about. But at present, 004 is indeed the most suitable system for Xianyuan City. Wang Xingxiao said. Different weapon systems had different focuses. For example, the desert prison of Jianghu State and the Sky Eye system equipped with several top field armies. In terms of power alone, because this system could be said to have the most powerful firepower of all weapon systems. But its precision could also be said to be the worst. The desert prison and the field armies didn't need high precision at all. What they needed was the explosive force on the battlefield that could cover everything in an instant. The Sky Eye, which could almost kill an invincible realm expert at the peak, was undoubtedly the best choice. The 004 system of Jianghu State had the most balanced performance. Its various performances might not be the best, but it had no shortcomings. The scope of investigation, the precision of weapons, the intensity of firepower, the scanning and identification. It had everything that should be and should not be. 004 was the most suitable system for guarding a city. The Wang family of Beihai certainly had its own weapon system. Their weapon system was even better than 004's in some aspects. It was more precise and faster. But correspondingly, the range of the Wang family of Beihai's weapon system was very small. In terms of adaptability in various situations, it was slightly worse than 004's. Wang Xingxiao thought silently, nodded, and then shook his head. But compared to Jianghu State, we are the most suitable ally for Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan can't be unaware of this. Firmament said quietly. That's true, but in the end, that's a matter for the future. I'm not saying that Li Tianlan doesn't have a long-term vision, but in many cases even if he sees it, he may not be willing to think about it. We can't bet on whether he's willing to think about the future or not. The situation is here. If we want to persuade Li Tianlan to cooperate with us, we have to offer at least what Jianghu State can offer or even more. Otherwise this negotiation is over. Firmament nodded. Before he spoke, a loud voice sounded in the helicopter's cockpit in front of them. Report. Firmament raised his eyebrows, stood up and said to Wang Xingxiao, I'll go and have a look. Wang Xingxiao nodded and continued to flip through the documents in his hand. Firmament left quickly and came back even faster. In less than 2 minutes he came back to Wang Xingxiao and said with a strange look, We seem to be a little fast. What do you mean? Wang Xingxiao smiled. Ahead? Firmament coughed. According to the signal, we are less than 3 kilometers away from the President and the Prime Minister's special plane. Wang Xingxiao raised his head and looked at Firmament. Firmament was also looking at Wang Xingxiao. Are there any missiles on our helicopter? Wang Xingxiao suddenly asked. Firmament's body trembled violently. Wang Xingxiao burst out laughing. I'm just kidding. Why are you so nervous? He stood up, looked ahead and said calmly, Let's slow down. Anyway, we can't get ahead of them. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.